for the ball. It's all over now. Babylon is going to fall. Babylon is falling. May she rest in pieces.
All right. We are live for the IPS Evening Deprogram, April 23rd, 2025. Just wrapped up a very eventful Holy Week. I was thinking about the Pope and Klaus Schwab stepping down, same time, both 88, both similar archetype and heads of the world, one in a more secular way, World Economic Forum, and the other with the papacy, the old world idea of this, the center of the head of this thing. And of course, one of them passed away, obviously, if you believe the story. I'm not really skeptical about the idea that people die, just for the record. However, that's not to say that the death of a person can't be capitalized on. I mean, there's a movie that came out last year called Conclave about the death of a pope, the replacement, how they go through the whole process. And someone suggested, could this be predictive programming? And I'm saying, no, that's just, I would say it's not really tactful, to make a movie that's so relevant to this guy's impending death. It's predictable, but maybe I haven't seen it. But speaking of this idea of predictive programming, I came across something very interesting. The other night, I did go see Sinners, as I said I would. And I always pay attention to the trailers. This has been a pattern. My assumption here, and this is what I'm going into the theater, thinking, is that because it's promoted, because it's mainstreamed, it's going to contain messaging, programming messaging that mirrors fake news. That life imitates art adage, this idea that this is just coincidental. The artists are reading the zeitgeist and translating it. No, that's not what's happening here. There's an entrainment between entertainment and what's happening in the theater of news media, the parts where they fake stuff, where they make these simulations real through miscontextualizing it. Like, for example, drills presented as real. If you think about a drill, a mass casualty drill, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about street theater in many ways. The president pretending that his ear got shot. Yeah, that wasn't a false flag. It wasn't a PR stunt where somebody really got shot. The whole thing was purely theatrical. So getting into this, as I said, I went to the movie and I watched the trailers because I'm just thinking I'm going to be inundated with imagery and messaging for what's to come. And this has been a consistent thing. I've always made this kind of my point here. What is the experience of the average audience member going to be? I'm approaching this as an anthropologist, just gathering information and not assuming anything, just saying, if you buy a ticket and you sit there, what kind of messaging are you going to be hit with? And the last time I saw a movie, it was the Mel Gibson one, Flight Risk. And in the trailer, there was one for a movie called Sinners. And this is the one I had to go see. And I noticed that it had this interesting dynamic of white vampires in Jim Crow, racially segregated South. And I thought, okay, this is interesting. So as the months passed, the movie's released. It was just released like during Holy Week. And we have this concurrent drama in the news regarding the stabbing of Austin Metcalf. So there are a number of things that immediately kind of stood out here as relevant to this, which I want to get into. But first, we're going to talk about the trailers. So I saw a trailer for Final Destination Bloodlines. And this is one of these things where Jurassic Liars needs to call in. Because the first thing I see is the Space Needle. And there's this girl giving a prophecy. I saw what death was about to do. So I'm like, that's interesting. And it comes out next month. So next month, a movie about the Space Needle and a prophesized disaster at the Space Needle comes out. But it gets even deeper. Because Final Destination Bloodlines comes out 25 years after the first Final Destination. Final Destination was about a person having a premonition about a disaster on an airplane. And the opening scene was just horror on a plane crashing. And it was like prescient in many ways visually as far as what we saw with 9/11. So this was one of these movies that was kind of lumped in the category of predictive regarding 9/11. So they already have this 9/11 connection with this franchise, Final Destination. So it turns out this new one is a prequel. The new one is about like the grandmother of the main character in the first movie. And the initial evasion of death that caused the characters to die off one by one wasn't the airplane. It was the grandmother stopping death from killing a bunch of people at the Space Needle. So she's at the Space Needle saying, I saw what death was about to do. She warns everybody, they laugh, but because she warned them, death didn't blow it up. So she saved all these lives, and this creates some kind of an imbalance. And so the Final Destination movie is about how death essentially makes up for what he missed because somebody kind of warned the victims. And so the imagery in the trailer is the Space Needle exploding several times, falling and exploding. So we have a connection now to the Seattle Space Needle and 9/11 through these predictive programming thing, because like the Twin Towers, there have been many movies, comics, and books where the Space Needle is consistently destroyed. Like if you think about how many times were the Twin Towers destroyed before they were literally destroyed? Like how many times did we see them symbolically destroyed in movies or in effigy? Just like the Mario Brothers, for example. You had King Koopa, who was based on Trump, played by Dennis Hopper, I believe. And in that one, they call them the Koopa Towers, and they disintegrate them. So we have seen many instances, Cookie Monster even ate the damn Twin Towers. We've seen many examples of Twin Towers being destroyed before it really happened. Well, there are many more examples of the Space Needle being destroyed. And I'm like, well, why would we think this would be any different? So I'm looking at this trailer and I'm like, okay, this is interesting because according to Jurassic Liars' I would say interpretation of the pre-programming, this is supposed to happen this June. Something's going down in June. Now, maybe this year. I don't know. I'm not speaking for anybody. But what I'm saying is we have been looking specifically at June 11th, 2025, as this is the day to watch Seattle and the Space Needle. So it's kind of funny that in May, we have the imagery of the Space Needle being destroyed, all tied to a prophecy and connected to a movie that was already connected to the body of predictive programming for, 9/11. So anyway, the fact that it's coming out right before June is interesting, eerie. A Final Destination trailer has a Jenga tower falling down. So in the trailer, you have the Jenga game and somebody pulls it and it falls. And this is something that happened in Leave the World Behind, the one that was produced by the Obamas. And when they pulled the Jenga tower here in Leave the World Behind, you hear a drone, and it's dropping off this Death to America literature in Arabic writing. So you have these allusions to 9/11 in Leave the World Behind with the Jenga tower falling. Now, in this one, the Jenga tower falling is also in the trailer. So again, this was just a trailer. The movie's not out yet, but from what I can see, I don't know. I think the timing of it is something to look forward to, because I mean, we've been talking about the Seattle Space Needle prophecy for some time, and I use the word prophecy loosely. But so now let's get into Sinners. And these are going to contain spoilers, obviously, but we're offering spoilers for the world stage. Who cares about the propaganda? Joined by Frank Murr, Dwayne Aubith, Roxy, Matt X, Piano Aldante, Let's Go, Ted Stryker, Hero Paranormal, Jennifer Reeves. Suzette says, I like the movie Conclave except for the ending. Since you haven't seen it, no, you can say what the ending is, because we're here as anthropologists, not really movie critics. We're not really trying to do anything other than look at the field of information as though it's not really compartmentalized between entertainment and news. And my contention is that it's not. That's the big conspiracy. The big conspiracy is that somehow the monolithic government that has bent our history, distorted our worldview in various ways, has somehow not taken heavy-handed control over the entertainment. And we're not cherry-picking examples and articles of things in media and then attaching it to news events. We're not doing what Bible prophets do, doomsday prophets. You take Revelation memorize it, look at the news, make connections. No, we're not making these specious connections. This isn't fallacious Texas sharpshooter reasoning where you draw the target after you find the connections. No, we have a methodology here. We're approaching media as though all the entertainment has already been co-opted for the purposes of advancing the psyops, the agendas that shape the world news agenda day by day, which becomes our fake history. And control over history is really what we're talking about. Control over the information, control over worldview. There's all these statements about those who control the past, control the present and the future. These things that Orwell spoke about, the Ministry of Truth. And this was all reiterated in that recent Francis Ford Coppola film, The Megalopolis, about empires. And he's talking about time control. And that's really what we're talking about here. But yeah, so I want to talk about this movie Sinners, because as I suggested before I went to go see it, it's going to contain information or scenes or themes relevant to what's happening on the world stage. And before I declare something like this, I look at the movie, what's the criteria here? Well, if it's being promoted, if it's number one, if it's by or associated with actors or directors whose movies have been associated with other psyops or predictive programming. For example, Mel Gibson. Mel Gibson is in Patriot, came out in 2000. At the very beginning, he sits on his rocking chair, which he just built, and he says it weighs 9 pounds, 11 ounces. 9/11. That's perfect. He sits on it and it crashes. Well, while he's sitting on it, everybody's watching him like they're expecting it to break. And you see the twin legs in the back. So it seems like that sounds a little 9/11-y, because immediately after, they're invaded. And the whole theme of patriotism and all this stuff comes up. And so this was right before 9/11. So whenever I see something with Mel Gibson, it's automatically suspect. So that's when I saw Flight Risk was a Mel Gibson movie being released the same week as the Challenger explosion, the Kobe Bryant disaster. I said, watch for aerial immolations. And what did we have at that time? Planes falling, the plane hitting the chopper and the like. Hero Paranormal says, can you post a link to where I can subscribe? Oh yeah, Patreon's gone. So the place to go is ips.monster or the Substack. It's just infiniteplanesociety.substack. And if you subscribe, it's, well, you get a few things. You get the archives, the video every night as soon as I upload it afterward with the summaries. And then you also get live stream notifications and newsletters. And I think tonight I posted a new PSYOP trading card, and this one is about I've been making so many. I'll have to see. I think I put the alien one, which we'll get to that. King Ravana says, I just watched JCVD Maximum Risk Species Alien Lady from the 90s. Okay, let's see. King Ravana says, Mima stops the death to sufferer imbalance. Yeah, the whole Final Destination movie is about this balance that's been disturbed, and death has to kind of just, I guess, meet the certain quota. He has to catch up, and it's an interesting series of movies. They're kind of gruesome, but the Space Needle Connection is actually a prequel to the one that was, correlated with 9/11. So it's interesting for these reasons. Enoch Skeen says Django was released in 1983, the only date that is 216 when spelled out. Django sounds like Jingo, which means orange. Yeah, I don't know the history of it, but the tower falling theme is, again, both in this movie about this tower falling and leave the world behind as a way of alluding to 9/11. Okay, Suzette Ann says, the big secret of Conclave is that one of the papal candidates found out recently he had a uterus and ovaries. I heard about that the next pope is going to be a female that was, I guess, presenting as male or something. Interesting twist. That's going to drive the transvestigation crowd wild, because they already believe that all the popes are women. It's just that's never going to go away. We do have a Discord. If you go to ips.monster, I have a new Discord, the IPR press room. We're just filling up, and I'm going to start activating it. The reason it's not really being used right now is that there's just no focus, but there are people posting things. And so I'm setting up an AI bot that scrapes all the posts, throws it into a Google sheet, And then that is processed through ChatGPT into a nice newsletter. So you can see what people have talked about, links that we've brought up, but it's going to be sort of a digest. I've already been experimenting with this, and I think I can get people interested on just maybe even just the topics and the various rabbit trails that we're following, because we're following some pretty unique, fringy trails, but we're finding some fascinating things about how this place may actually work. Okay, so I'm watching Sinners to look for any overlap between the current state of the world stage. So a couple of things I think I can bring up. I have an article I posted from, well, Perplexity. I asked a few questions just to get some links, just for some background on this particular movie. Let's go through my article first. And again, if you subscribe to my newsletters, you get all this stuff. So it starts out 1930s, Jim Crow South, the Grand Dragon of the KKK and his clan. So these are major spoiler alerts, but you have this overlap between vampires and the clan. But one of the interesting scenes here is the clan is being gunned down by a sniper. And of course, nobody would have a problem with that. They're just the bad guys. They were going to kill people anyway. But this image of this righteous mass murder of all these Klansmen in the Grand Dragon kind of stood out to me as interesting, because just the other day, Tucker Carlson and Alex Jones said that they were both predicting a false flag. And the last time these two spoke, Tucker was really complimenting Jones on how he predicted 9/11. So here we have an example of Tucker Carlson saying to Alex Jones that there will be a false flag that will be disguised as a fight against racism, and that this will be used to shut down free speech on media. Now, I've been saying for some time that Disease X would be a mind virus used as a justification to silence the internet, to lock it down. And this fits that whole, I think, direction things could be going. So a fight against racism means a black shooter or a BLM associated shooter or an Antifa with an Uzi, as was referenced in The Madness, against some group. And they cite the Patriot Front. So the Patriot Front, KKK, what's the difference? There really isn't any. We're talking about masked individuals, provocateurs, racial ethno-nationalism. And so the idea that they could be mowed down has been floated around by Alex Jones and Tucker Carlson. So you may know Tucker Carlson, big agitator for all these things. I think he's a survivor of an alien attack. He's got scars to prove it, but he hasn't shown us yet. Now, a couple of other things. The main characters in the movie are twins, and the actor Michael B. Jordan plays both of them. And I didn't know this. I thought that these were twins. But yeah, Michael B. Jordan plays a double role in this movie. And he's Smoke and Stack. He returns to Mississippi in the 1930s to find it overrun by vampires. So here's where the parallels get. I was saying there's going to be parallels because, so this movie already has the racial thing, them versus the Klan. So on the world stage right now, we have the Patriot Front versus BLM Antifa dynamic. And we recently had this event with Carmelo Anthony, the 17-year-old from Frisco. Now, he was arrested for stabbing Austin Metcalf. They bailed him out. But the thing of it is, Austin Metcalf reportedly died bleeding in the arms of his twin brother. The exact same thing happens in the movie. So I'm like, okay, so you've got twins. One of them dies bleeding in the hands of the other. You have this other overlap. So that kind of stood out to me. And then I saw this. There's a critical review in Slate, and they bring up Jordan Peele's influence in this. So Jordan Peele directed Nope, and it was inspired by the George Floyd incident and the inflammatory video and the chaos that it caused, the spectacle. So Jordan Peele being brought up in this context is actually highly relevant for a number of reasons. Then the twin thing. So this is a quote from the Slate article. The multifaceted depth of the allegory Coogler is spinning out here put me in the mind of Jordan Peele's Us and Nope, two horror epics that use the uncanny double to explore complex ideas about racial identity and systemic injustice. So this twin thing got me thinking, uncanny double. This uncanny double refers to, I think, the vampires, they present as human, you let them in, they kill you. The Klansmen, who pretended to be businessmen selling them this building and then going in to kill them. But the double thing, the twin thing, being built into this thing also mirrors this story of these twins. And we were like, what is the significance of twins? And I thought this might even tie into the not literal twins, but the Pope and Klaus Schwab, getting off the stage at the same time. And then the number 88, of course, is heavily associated with the Twin Towers. So there's some interesting symbolism to look at here. And then a nope inspired by George Floyd, Twin Cities. And we've talked about the numerous twin symbolism with that event, including Stephen Jackson calling George Floyd his twin, the 846 timestamp connected to the Twin Tower attack. So many twin overlaps. But the uncanny double thing, here's a description of what this means. This is embodied as the uncanny double, the doppelganger, the alter ego, an unleashed monster that acts as a physical manifestation of a disassociated part of the self. So the movie 28 Days Later, they have the image of the chimpanzees being infected with the mind virus and then makes them violent, and the humans catch it. So this double thing has to do with, of course, the unleashing of a tidal wave of violence because of mind viruses, radicalization, right-wing terrorism. The Madness series that I've been alluding to, because we're living in it, was really ultimately about the madness of the mind viruses that radicalize the right wing into Nazism. I mean, this is Netflix, of course. Okay, so Mike, again, he plays a twin. I'm going through my notes. Okay, the director also directed Black Panther. So Black Panther has a great deal of significance to 2020. If you remember, Chadwick Boseman died 2020. Mr. 42. So you have the connection with the MLB and the first Black player, Mr. 42, played by Chadwick Boseman, who also was Black Panther. So the Black Panthers, separate from Marvel, the Black Panthers, obviously an extension of or predecessor to BLM, have some significance here as well. But that is another rabbit trail. But again, this movie and its correlation with the stabbing of the twin and it gets deeper, because it's not just the stabbing of the twin and the racial overtones, these dynamics in play, but after the stabbing, if you've been following the story, Jake Lang, this is something I didn't know until just a little while ago. Jake Lang is the one trying to turn Austin Metcalf into like a white Trayvon Martin. He's been trying to agitate off of it, and he is critical of the father, calling him weak, because the father does not want his son to be used as a political prop. So it turns out Jake Lang, his background here, 29-year-old from Narrowsburg, New York, was a prominent participant in January 6, 2021, the U.S. Capitol riot, facing 11 federal charges, including assaulting law enforcement with a deadly weapon, physical violence on restricted grounds, and he's not yet been sentenced after 4 years in pretrial detention. He was released on January 21st, when Trump ordered the release of Lang and 1,500 others. So the guy who's part of this PSYOP, who's interacting with the family, and the family are now claiming to be victims of this guy's misinformation, death threats, and other things. So Jake Lang is a January 6th guy, which tells you everything. It means that he's fake, that he's an obvious crisis actor. So if he's an actor, then what are the chances that the family is not? You see, you don't have crisis actors interacting with real people on the world stage. It doesn't work that way. They live in a separate reality, a parallel universe. They're hyperstitions, they're fictions, they're constructs. So after his release, Lang returned to the public eye, expressing continued justification for January 6th. So he's still an insurrectionist. But the thing here is that now he's tangled up in this stabbing. It says about the case, Austin Metcalf was a 17-year-old high school football player from Frisco, Texas, was stabbed on track meet on April 2nd. And then Carmelo Anthony, of course, was released on like $250K bond. And it says there was a significant rise in death threats and harassment sent to the family. And a lot of the stuff has been attached to Jake Lang's provocations. Okay, so let me go through your comments. Unmitigated Mind says, you guys know the story about the suspect of the FSU changing his name legally to Phoenix at 15. I noticed his name was Phoenix, and I said there's some significance to the Phoenix with Holy Week, which is actually a thing that we've noted many times. Because if you didn't know, the Phoenix was originally a symbol for Christ. It represented Christ. These things are synonymous. The theme of death and resurrection. So the idea of a Holy Week Phoenix, not shocking at all. It's an interesting symbol in itself, and we should probably do a whole video and conversation about its prevalence in various movies and how the character, the Joker, embodies this theme, and his name, Joaquin, Phoenix. And that movie Joker in 2019, how it preceded the riots of 2020, all of it is very significant to this whole great reset concept. But let's stick with your comments here. Verk Jen says, like the Google Gemini twins. Yeah, I thought there was something with the twins when you had Butch Wilhelm and Suni Williams going to space, launching in Gemini, the two of them up there, 9 months. I don't know the whole thing, but it was kind of layered with stuff. You had the Odyssey, the Calypso is the capsule they were in, and Calypso is the nymph who keeps Odysseus stranded for 7 years before he goes back home. So they were stranded, and I thought there's some kind of subtext here that we're probably picking up on. But yes, Lang being an obvious crisis actor, that's a big deal. That just puts everything in a whole new context. It says Lang's release has divided public opinion in his hometown. So his whole thing was getting in the face of the father, getting him on the phone and saying, this is a systemic problem. This is that your son is a victim of Democrat policies, politicizing some other person's son's death. But it goes deeper. So Jake Lang has also been critical of the father's GoFundMe account and how the goal went from 6,000. Listen to this. This is actually from Jake Lang. He says, is Austin Metcalf's father grieving, or is he a grifting sperm donor? April 2nd, Austin Metcalf is stabbed at his high school truck meet by a violent thug, Carmelo Anthony, and it's all caps. Subhuman scum, weakest father in America, Jeffrey Metcalf, logs into a GoFundMe and says, my son, Austin Metcalf, was stabbed today at a track meet. Now, anybody who has a family member died going right to a GoFundMe account, yeah, that's kind of, I don't know if there's some kind of, I don't know, there's something sociopathic about it, psychopathic about it. I mean, that's not the first thing you would think, especially not a father with a grieving son and mother. I mean, to me, that is unbelievable that he would have done that. So I understand that. Money starts flooding in. Like, one of my questions is, why them? A lot of people lose family members and they don't rush to GoFundMe. In fact, there's a lot of scams you have to watch out for where people say, my loved one died, can you give us some money? Panhandlers raising money for fake funerals. So it's kind of an unusual thing. And I'm surprised GoFundMe even allows it. Like, what is the basis? And it's the same thing we saw with Daniel Penny and his legal defense, where you have these PSYOP characters getting a conspicuous war chest, just like huge amount of money and support, which like celebrities giving money to Daniel Penny. I think Kid Rock gave him like, was it 50K? But anyway, in this case, it says here, this is Jake Lang. So the father sits behind his computer all day while his son's blood is still wet on his other son's shirt and proceeds to update the fundraising goal 7 times on April 2nd. So it went from 6,000 to 9,000 to 13,000. And I think the goal went up to $1 million. So here he is calling out the father as greedy. And he says here, your weakness and greed and your heartless cuckolding to your son's killers put, in all caps, all white people in jeopardy. So you can see this is a January 6th guy, and he's throwing out some very inflammatory racial rhetoric here in terms of like trying to create a race war. This is exactly on brand, by the way, with a lot of these right-wing types, from Tucker Carlson and anybody talking about, get out of the cities, and anybody supporting Daniel Penny, they all kind of jump onto this whole bandwagon. Like they need to put, they want their own BLM. They want a White Lives Matter. They want a white Trayvon Martin. And it's interesting that the father, again, is pushing back against it, but he's kind of being used anyway. So he goes on to say, you are a disgrace to white fathers. He says a lot of really crazy things. So again, I'm just reading a tweet from a January 6th participant. Jake Lang calls himself a political prisoner. So you're looking at a Fed, basically. There's no other way to look at it, because nobody died on January 6th. The whole thing was a provable hoax. If you were a part of it, you were aware that it was fake. Nobody got tricked. Nobody walked into a staged riot and just got sucked into the system and got arrested. There were no January 6th political prisoners. The least believable one is Jake Chansley, the guy with the spear. No, he was not really in jail. He was not in prison. He was getting training to be some kind of new age conspiracy theorist to hype up the QAnon people. These are all actors. And literally, I mean, Jake Chansley, the QAnon shaman, is an actor. You can look at his IMDb, performance artist or whatever. Okay, so this is Jake Lang's tweet. We'll get past that. I'm just pointing it out that this is a dominant narrative right now, and that you got a character who was in one of the biggest psyops of the century, January 6th. And here he is hyping up the dynamics of this particular event, putting it in a certain context that I think puts it in the same context as the film Sinners. So the bleeding twin is just an overlapping thing. So am I making any predictions based on this? Well, it's kind of interesting because if you watch a movie like Sinners, you hear a lot of slurs and you see a lot of attitudes and things that you don't really see in real life. So it's like they like to pick at old wounds with these movies, generate animosity, they really literally demonize white people in that movie by turning them into the vampires. And it's not subtle, really. I mean, they kind of play it off like, well, the Irish were vampires, and so it wasn't really oppressed people, and the Klansmen weren't all the same. But I don't know. I mean, even the Irish vampires were Klansmen. Okay, let's continue here. Going through my minds.com/Infinite Plane Society. So we talked about the Space Needle falling and Sinners as it relates to the fatal stabbing of Austin Metcalf. So here's the new PSYOP trading card. You can get these at infiniteplanesociety.com. I have them on eBay. I have them everywhere. And the idea here is to proliferate these. These are stickers right now, but once I've created a sufficient number, we're going to sell them like packets, like Pokemon cards. So this one says Invasion, and it just has a CIA agent putting on an alien mask. Is anybody still waiting for this? See, I don't think they're going to bring about literal aliens. I think the alien invasion is really a couple of things. It's a rapture story for the atheist. I think it's part of this religion of nasatology. That's one part of it. It's because there's different versions of it. Sometimes the aliens are bad and they're destroying us because we're destroying the earth. So, like they're Gaia's angels of wrath and judgment. Other times they're benevolent space brothers bringing us technology and helping us to evolve because they're more evolved versions of us. Like angels are perfected humans because they've shed their bestial natures. And then other times they're kidnappers and probers, and they create hybrids, which is very biblical. If you look at the story of the Watchers mating with human women. So you have all these overlaps. So I tend to think that the alien mythology is simply mythology. I don't think there's going to be a literal alien invasion, but I think it's a fascinating topic. Oh yeah, let's talk about Wiz Khalifa. So Wiz Khalifa was talking to Mark Lemon. Let me see. Lamont Hill. Excuse me, Lamont Hill. Mark Lamont Hill was shocked when Wiz Khalifa brought out his flat earth theory. And this is pretty good. I listened to the whole thing. I don't know if you all heard this, I'm going to go ahead and share it. I'm going to play some of it because he's not really wrong. I mean, what he's expressing here is what I consider to be a bit of a agnosticism, not even believing in space travel. But there's something else that he said that was interesting. He suggested that, and he pointed at the floor to describe. He said Earth could be right over there, and there could be other places. And so this is kind of interesting because the only idea that ever made sense to me about why they would distort the maps is because they're hiding resources. But of course, we know they wouldn't distort the maps. It's not like they would lie about history. It's not like they would fake the news. So certainly we can trust them with cartography and not hiding and concealing any real estate. Okay, so this conversation is pretty decent. And again, he doesn't believe in... Oh, they even asked him about Kate Perry. And his answer is hilarious. So I'll parse through it.
Like, I love imagining shit. Like, why? Yeah, for sure. Yes, 100%.
Is the Earth round?
I would say no.
What shape is it?
I just believe that we live on a flat plane. Yeah, like a huge flat plane. Yeah, it's only because I've traveled so much and I see like.
Did you ever get to the edge of the Earth?
Nah.
Okay.
Now, this conversation goes on for 7 minutes, and I think it actually gets productive. And what the opinion of Mark Lamont Hill is that that he's not commenting on it very much, but he's basically saying, do you have the expertise to make these claims? He's kind of hands off, but he hears them out. But one of the best parts here is they bring up Kate Perry, and I want to find that part because we asked, do you think she really went up?
Views about flat Earth and the Earth being round.
Yeah,
and we spoke about it.
Yeah, I got that view.
So,
I tend to lean more toward astronomy and geology and physics, and people who have seen the Earth and and like
Science.
But
that shit's fake too, though, right?
We'll talk to him.
What you mean? Say more.
It's what somebody told you.
Yeah, that shit. They tell you that so you believe it.
Then we go.
It's
When you say that, I'm just curious. Who you thinking?
Those people you was talking about.
Well, I'm thinking about before science, like before Europe and all of that, when like ancient African tribes were looking at the Earth, they saw.
No, that's some interesting points. Although it's not necessarily true that everybody knew it was a ball because of ancient Greeks, because you do have the Chinese, I think, who had something like a square flat, but they did have a celestial sphere. Now, I'm not going to play all 7 minutes of it, but I want to find the part where he comments on Kate Perry.
That pertains to this, but I'm open to listen.
Today, if they offered you the COVID-19.
No, I don't want to hear about that. They got into other conspiracies, but I think I might have earmarked it. Okay, yeah, actually, so I have it here. It says, now the channel has 5.6 million subs, and it looks like, okay, this is it. Let me just see if I can play this little clip.
I think that
A pandemic?
Sorry.
Yeah, but the whole
said science predicated on science.
Right, and what I'm saying is, for it to be an effective conspiracy, it'd be very difficult for everybody, including people who have left the Earth and seen the Earth, including all the satellites, including all the technology that is predicated upon the Earth not being flat, for all of it to work. The physics wouldn't work. Modern physics wouldn't work if the Earth were. Let me ask you a question, and just answer yes or no, and I'll leave it alone. Do you feel like you know enough about science to be able to make an assessment and make a strong case for flat Earth?
I've read and I watched a lot of shit. And what I'm gonna say is this: when you listen to people that fly planes, when you listen to pilots.
Well, I'm not going to play it all, but his answer was the door. And they all kind of laughed it off. But for the most part, it was an interesting conversation. I don't think that anybody has a flat Earth model. I think that they went down to Antarctica and they effectively burned the straw man model. But the idea of a model is what we have been rejecting since we first came across reasons to doubt the version of things as presented by the space agencies. Mousegate, any space fakery, the fake ISS, Apollo 11. If this is fake, well, then it says that we can't claim to have a perfect model or a complete model because we don't know what's outside of it. So I'm suggesting here that shape is secondary to whether or not we're in an open or a closed system regarding information. And I think we're in a closed system of information through a I think we're muted. Okay, I'm sorry about that. We got muted somehow. I'll fix that. By the way, I have this new program, this AI bot that will take your podcast and parse through it and chop out dead air, just kind of automatic. Virgin says the YouTuber Leaving Babylon has very interesting videos about old maps and hidden lands. She's Christian, which will turn some off, but what she shows is intriguing. Now, I'd be interested to know if people who are, convinced it's a ball are open to the idea that their version of it could have been misrepresented. For example, if all the measurements compute and everything matches up and it's a big spinning ball according to every point of observation, and it confirms this model that we've been told, like Jaron has arrived at the ball Earth. Well, is Jaron convinced? Let me fix the mic here. Do we have a mic issue? Is Jaron convinced that there's no more land, that the globe is in fact valid in itself? I mean, the shape is one thing, determining the shape, but does that mean, okay, we got mic issues? Okay, let me go ahead and fix that really quick here. I don't know if I can fix it on the fly. And of course, I'll just have to edit this after the fact, no big deal. I'm using a new system. Okay, there we go. I'm using a new system. Okay, well, anyway, to get to my point, my question was, so Jaronism goes down to Antarctica, he measures everything, he determines it to be a big ball. So he's content, it's a ball, I've checked. Now, does that mean necessarily that the ball contains the land masses arranged exactly as they say in all accounts? For example, uncharted waters. Could there be another continent? Could the entire space program's purpose be to provide us a comprehensive view of the world from space so we don't ask any questions about what's over here, and maybe they could, squirrel away a continent or two, or misrepresent the climate in a certain area? So, I mean, these are valid questions that a skeptic should be asking. If we're going to question the news, you're going to question history. Some people say dinosaurs don't exist. Then why shouldn't you question the maps? So I think it's valid. I mean, conspiracy theorists have always been asking questions. What's at Antarctica, underground bases, all these conspiracies? Is that where the UFOs are parked? So I think it's useful conjecture, but it's not only about shape. Because if you can't trust the ones that are presenting us the worldview, when it comes to news in general, we're talking about a news framed against a history that's been infused with a lot of fakery. So the scale of the line is just so vast that it wouldn't be off-brand for the news fakers, the worldview monopoly, to hide something big. Atlantis, perhaps. I don't know. But what I'm saying is that, okay, so you prove it's a ball. Does that mean that you can now trust the space agencies? And what other justification could there be for the terrible science fiction they've been presenting us? Why even bother? Why would they even bother faking the space station if their special effects was never really even up to the task? Their special effects have always been terrible. So what was the urgency? And it could have been simply not about shape, but about something else entirely. Again, hiding resources, hiding land. What do you think? Put your thoughts in the chat. So we were just listening to Wiz Khalifa talking to Mark Lamont Hill about the Earth being a ball or flat. And he didn't really have any reasons for saying it's flat, other than he's traveled a lot, which isn't really a reason. But I do think that it is reasonable to be skeptical. It is reasonable to be more skeptical than people who think they are skeptics tend to be. Because most people think that they are skeptics. Most people think that they are very critical and skeptical thinkers, but they only apply it in the direction of the opposition, of the other side. It's bifurcated. Every mainstreamer knows not to believe in conspiracy theories. Every conspiracy theorist knows not to believe the mainstream news. So there's not a lot of thinking involved in that. There's not a lot of real critical thinking. In fact, it's just knee-jerk reaction, and the reflexive nature of it is why I reject a lot of the anti-positions. Violet Pengon says, control movement, more land, resources like Avatar. Yeah, that's another point. So Avatar, environmentalist movie, James Cameron, I think he said testosterone is a toxin. He brought us Terminator 2, Arnold Schwarzenegger, the Avatar 1, 2, and 3 coming out very soon. And these movies are all connected. Terminator's got Skynet, and of course, the Avatar's got Pandora, which is this global consciousness. He's a big part of this worldview formation. And environmentalism is one of the big themes here. In fact, in Avatar, Gaia is essentially killed by humans. So humans go to this moon called Pandora, like a bunch of parasites. And Pandora is inhabited by the Na'vi, who are in touch with nature. They live in balance with it. And the humans don't. And so this is all about the West. And the idea that we can't go into space, or we can't continue to live with this political economic system of capitalism and polluting and plundering natural resources. But looking at it from this perspective, it wouldn't be hard to justify hiding a bunch of land. If you could just point at the human race and say, hey, look, these people are bad for the environment. Maybe we should limit their expansion. Like, there's already plans, if you look at some of these radical environmentalist ideas of, basically turning cities into like human zoos and then rewilding everything else. And I think that notion could already be in effect. Like, we might already be quarantined. And I've thought about this before, even with the idea of it, if it were a flat plane and there were more land, maybe there's a reason why this particular area has been given an artificial perimeter. Lord Laney says, whatever shape, they need to bring the zeitgeist down for a great reset. Skepticism threatens their model. I bet the word auto-hoax keeps these proverbial reptiles awake at night. Oh, yeah, it's 100%, because the alternative media is essentially what I would consider them to be is the controlled opposition. They are the controlled alternative, and they need the alternative to keep people from leaving altogether. So their job is just to get all the lost sheep and put them in a big pen. It truly is a gatekeeping operation. By the way, I released this AI-generated coloring book, Meditations on Media Fakery, and I just put a video of it on YouTube and on Twitter. And what it does is it goes through all the images. It actually starts out with the life. All the world's a stage, and the men and women are merely players. So every other page is a coloring book image. Like, here's the dancing nurses with the syringes. But the other page is a quote, like Marshall McLuhan, we become what we behold. We've got some from Edward Bernays. If we understand the mechanism and motives of the group mind, it is possible to control and regiment the masses according to our will without them knowing it. That's another thing too. Mass mind control is not a conspiracy. I mean, I don't know where anybody got the idea that that was a conspiracy. Like, nobody here is arguing that mass mind control is not a thing. These days, it's carried out by mass media. It used to be through the masses in the churches, religion. But media is the new religion. It has supplanted the old religions, contains all the same mythologies, including alien angels, including eschatologies, climate change, but without the baggage of traditional mythologies and worldviews. They want everything progressive, but it's essentially the same thing. Mass mind control. And by mind control, I mean worldview warfare. I'm talking about a Truman Show or frame of reference that they put into everybody's head. What's up? One Eye Jack says, no bueno, Mr. Penguin. Did you guys hear about the penguin that caused a plane crash on January 19th somewhere in Africa. It says they didn't have the penguin contained, and it caused the plane to crash. And that's an interesting date if you go back and look at January 19th and the movie ISS coming out with the ISS falls, the Donnie Darko connections. That number has some fascinating connections we've talked about. But on that date, yeah, a plane fell, and they say it's because the penguin wasn't in a cage. And someone sent it to me and they said, is this some kind of a message directed to us? Like we haven't been properly gate kept and that we're putting everything in danger? Super bizarre. Unmitigated Mind says, get metal implants for your auto hoax brass knuckles. Make sure to leave your mark on those. You know, I have not brass knuckles, but I found a figure eight. I found an infinity sign made of brass that you can use like brass knuckles. And it says on it, infinite impact. If you look at the images on the screen again, the cartoon images, like here you have one from the Boston bombing. Here's some bolt cut shooters. These are on the right. On the left, you've got quotes. Here's another Edward Bernays. The average citizen is the world's most efficient censor. He owns his own mind is the greatest barrier between him and the facts. His own logical proof is the most terrible thing imaginable, for it's made out of his own desires. Edward Bernays was the progenitor of public relations and knew how to influence people by playing upon their desires. We're talking about marketing, mass marketing. And I think it's important to recognize that mass marketing and propaganda are the same thing. So when we're talking about movies that have messaging placed there to influence how you interpret the news, we're talking about the marketing of ideas, of propaganda ideas. Like, this is not mystical. It's not confusing. This is not a radical or an extreme claim. And I'm attempting to demystify it because the mystification of media has been one of the major guardrails that has helped keep a lot of people in that box. And I'm pointing out these explanations, these false explanations for what we see on the world stage can be dispensed with. We have something better. If you look at it as a model, what is your model of the world? It's what you perceive, your internalized version of things, your internal simulation of the world as you perceive it, informed by your experience and what you learn. But there's the other element of your indoctrination or your education and where you get your information. That's what augments your internalized Truman Show. And so your model for the world is that I live here, but I learn what's going on out there because the screen is a window that lets me see everywhere else in the world. So if you process everything as though you're looking out a window, you're treating it as though it's objective. You're treating the subjective, the manipulated, the deep fakery as objective reality. In other words, delusions. And this isn't far-fetched. This is how religions work. Think about all the people in cults who believe crazy stuff that they cannot ever test because it's an unfalsifiable model. So the mainstream media model is essentially unfalsifiable. They assume that everything they're seeing is objective and they build their narratives on top of that. The conspiracy theorists are even worse because they accept the premise and then they have all kinds of alternative explanations that require additional leaps of logic, additional non sequiturs. You have to include the premise that this particular group is doing this for that, and it just builds and builds with these belief clusters. And I'm saying that that takes you deeper into the programming, which is why I refer to the mainstream mediation, MSM, as the basic system, the basic model, but the conspiracy model is MSM plus. It's more convoluted. It's very convoluted to say, hey, it's kind of strange that on the day that Trump was shot, you had all these movies where presidents were getting shot at. And these movies all seem to be prescient. Like, there's no way to explain that if your model is mainstream other than coincidences. But the conspiracy theorists say, no, this is a simulation. It's a trick from the Matrix, or it's some kind of evidence that we live in a video game. Now, those might be valid areas to speculate, and you get into metaphysical speculation, I suppose, but there's no reason why you should see something on TV that makes you question reality, the reality of your senses. Like my senses can't inform me, but what I see through the TV can, because it's showing me some ultimate reality that everything is fake. So to me, that is a step in the direction of insanity, subjectivity, solipsism. And I see this all, these are mainstream alternative ideas, like the mainstream conspiracy theories. For example, the movie White Noise on Netflix came true when the train derailed in Palestine, Ohio. And it wasn't just that it was just like the movie, and even the mass media commented on it, but extras in the movie had to be evacuated from the real thing, from the real event, because it happened at the same place. So you're looking at these overlaps. So again, when this happened, InfoWars comes out and they say, this is because dark occultists have to tell us what they're going to do in order to avoid karmic retribution. So now they're talking about dark occultists, so wizards, and some kind of force in the cosmos that does bad things to people that do bad things unless they somehow tell their victims first. So that's convoluted. That makes no sense. But that is the standard explanation whenever truthers see conspicuous coincidences between events on the world stage and in the entertainment. So I've been very critical of that perspective for some time because it's been given a pass. So here I am trying to objectively analyze the fake news, and I have people coming in saying, no, that's happening because of wizards. And I'm like, well, show me these dark occultists. Because the closer I look, the less mystical it seems, and the more akin to marketing it seems. Like we're looking at marketing of propaganda surreptitiously that somehow bypasses all of the laws about subliminal influence. But every movie is an influence operation. Every movie is intended by its release date, by its proliferation, by how it's put in your frame of reference. Maybe not yours, but we're talking about consistent messaging, concurrent, consistent messaging relayed out there to set the stage for something. Like I would argue, think about how someone's indoctrinated into a certain worldview. They see rich people as bad, as polluters. Well, then they see something, the CEO getting shot, and they applaud. They can justify the destruction of Cybertrucks. And that's because of their frame of reference. So the leftist frame of reference justifies these acts because they're in class warfare and they're fighting against their oppressors. So there's no reason to suggest, or there's no reason to doubt, that the frame of reference provided by entertainment, it helps you interpret what you see in the news. Like I would say that the Luigi character was very sympathetic to people who might have identified with the Joker's struggles. And these stories mirror each other in a myriad of ways. Visually, even various scenes overlap. The kill the rich thing, class warfare, the depose the CEO thing, ties right into the Joker kill the rich theme. The class warfare hero with the green hair, and then you have the class warfare hero with the green hood. These are parallels that we were just observing, and it goes pretty deep because it's not just the Joker movie. It's the theme that was presented in the #1 Netflix film at the time. But you can see that these are, again, there to get you to interpret the fake news event in a certain way, have an opinion on it, emote to it, rather than critically examining it. Think about when Trump was shot at. Instead of saying, was it even real? People were saying, oh, it must have been DEI, must have been Joe Biden, must have been the deep state, must have been Obama, must have been a second shooter. So their frame of reference is really about DEI and Biden and deep state intrigue. That's the conspiracy theory frame of reference. So they all arrive at these various rabbit trails to explain what they saw, but all of these things are adding to what we actually know. They're adding on top of it with stuff we don't know, instead of subtracting what can't be verified, which is my starting point, which is our starting point, the subtractive view. Unless you think the mass media deserves the benefit of the doubt and you want to carry its burden of proof, which makes you a propaganda mule. Nicotramus had tweeted this at me. More people need your operating system, Tim. Subtract, don't add. You'll be right more often than not. The reason why we made this a stance, not just like, we're not just being ironic. Oh, that's fake, that's fake. No, the reason why we took the stance that media fakery is something to consider with every major event is because by working on the premise that every story is potentially fake, we consistently found ourselves to be correct. Like, it's a mistake to think that all the news that you didn't personally vet can be treated as real. But no one has the time to go through every single news story. So the model that we are working with here categorically debunks entire types of stories very easily, because they simply don't provide adequate burden of proof for a lot of things. But anyway, subtractive. Okay, moving on. I brought this up a little while ago, but I asked Perplexity about it because this is pretty good. MSM over-reporting mass school shootings. The school shootings that weren't. In August of 2018, NPR published an investigative report called The School Shootings That Weren't. They looked into the Department of Education civil rights data collection for 2015, 2016 for school-related shootings because there were 240 reports. So this is like right on the heels of, Parkland. School shootings were really hot at that time. So NPR is like, wow, there are 240. This is huge. So they go through it and they find out that out of the 240 that they bothered to check, because nobody was checking it. People are running around like, oh, it's so dangerous. There's a school shooting every day. It's an epidemic of mass shootings. No, it turns out of the 240 that they checked, and this is the key, if you passively accept the news, you're going to passively imbibe a lot of fake stuff. So you have to be active. You have to reject it or suspend judgment because you hadn't had time to look. You don't have to have an opinion on everything at the moment that it's presented to you. You don't have to believe headlines. But here's what they found. Out of 240 school shootings, only 11 were real incidents. It says many schools or districts responded that there weren't any and they couldn't confirm these. So somebody's lying. Systemic lying, systemic fakery. It says 25% did not even respond to their follow-up inquiries. Many events were misclassified. Reports of knives were lumped in together. Toy cap guns on a school bus was entered as a school shooting. One California school district was reported as having 26 shootings, but the superintendent said there had been none in 30 years. So this district is said to have had 26 shootings, but there weren't any in 30 years. So what other areas are there where we have been given fake news as real without any opportunity to fact check it or test it or reality test these claims? And this is just one area. It says the inaccuracies stem from haphazard data collection reported by local school districts. It sounds to me like a conspiracy. You don't have to have a theatrical production for every school shooting, just these big ones, and then you just report a bunch of them, and people just assume, oh yeah, this happens all the time. The Department of Education relied on self-reported data from thousands of school districts without verification or spot checks. So again, somebody's lying. Now, why would they lie? The NPR report highlighted the importance of accurate data in shaping public perception and policy decisions about school safety and gun violence. The findings suggest that while school shootings are a serious issue, the frequency was not as high as official statistics indicate. Fascinating. It says this report was of interest to Northeastern University criminologist James Allen Fox. And he says that statistically, schools are safer now than in the 1990s. And the 1990s was really before school shootings started. Bertrand says some people propose there's more land in the north. Yeah, look, everybody's talking about Antarctica. Somebody needs to go check out Mount Meru. And we have a good reason to believe there might be something there. Because this supposed magnetic mountain, 33 miles in circumference at the center of the North Pole, was talked about by Gerardus Mercator. So you have someone on these voyages of exploration who was there, writing about it to John Dee, who coined the phrase British Empire. Like, these are not insignificant historical characters. The fact that they talked about it says that there's something to see. So I'm kind of interested to know if North Pole is nothing. And I think there's a series called His Dark Materials on Netflix. And I think it ties into the Golden Compass. But anyway, His Dark Materials is exactly that. That if you keep going to the north, you actually enter some kind of other world where the people are psychic, imbued with certain powers. They're other beings. And that we down here are just sort of like in the Matrix. It's a series that I watched, again, His Dark Materials. It also has this reoccurring theme of those people from the northern areas come down here to harvest the soul energy of the kidnapped children that they take. So I don't know what it is, this fixation. So many movies where this theme of soul harvesting seems to be very prevalent. Okay, let's see here. We're talking about the fake news of the day. So Mick West is always debunking UFOs. It's one of his main things. And I asked him today, or yesterday, I said, has it occurred to you that belief in UFO is part of the state religion that has replaced traditional mythology with contemporary science fiction counterparts? I've noticed many atheists believe in aliens, but not angels. And I get the sense that aliens are just an updated version. I find it very inconsistent that Mick West can debunk all kinds of UFOs and drones and chemtrails, but he believes in the ISS. I find that to be very inconsistent. Let's see, Tim Pool is in the White House. People are giving him crap because he's wearing his beanie. But Tim Pool in the White House, I don't know if this is worth hearing. None of these individuals have any credibility with me, but they're worth paying attention to just to know what alt media thinks. And these are more culture warriors than conspiracy theorists, although the conspiracy theorists see these individuals as mostly on their side or possibly swayable, like they could, like allies against the mainstream. But they're all gatekeepers. It pretty much goes without saying. All right, let's see what we have here. I'm going through my tweets now. Here it is. Now, this is an interesting one because I got into this discussion with John LeBon about predictive programming. And, people have their own takes on things, and he doesn't believe in it, which is fine. I don't, quote, believe in it. I'm just observing it because I don't see myself as the one making predictions or drawing these connections. I'm saying, no, I'm pointing out the connections planted there by media. And our research has expanded beyond looking at past media, but looking at what is happening in the now and how the timing of it reveals something. And I can give so many examples, but without going through a long list, just the fact that a news story on the world stage, a fake story comes out in the wake of something with a trailer, a movie, at the same time, is an eerie coincidence at a minimum. So we can agree that these are coincidences, that these are happening. But what happens when you document dozens of coincidences? Well, it's a pattern. And so we're trying to figure out what is the explanation for the pattern. Are we having sound problems? We're using a new system, and so I think we might be having issues with sound. Just one second. And I haven't been updating the archives in the podcasts It's been a couple of weeks. I've been very busy, and I'm not going to get any less busy, but I am using AI bots. Okay, so the sound's messed up again. Interesting. I guess I'm still learning this new system. It's called StreamYard. One moment here. I'm just going to go through the settings. Strange. It was strange because I thought it was fixed a minute ago. There's got to be a way to prevent that from going back to the old mic, because that is the correct one now. Yeah, no big deal. But anyway, so I'm just trying to, before I'm not going to get into the topic very much. I think we all know. But what I am doing here is getting rid of some straw man arguments right off the bat. One, I do not contend that everything is fake. I say that the news media is largely unaware and uninformed of its own role as a propaganda vehicle for a worldview monopoly. Most people wouldn't know the difference. If you're in it, you wouldn't know. It's not like everybody's in the know about fake news. Fake news is considered to be a conspiracy theory. But replace that with propaganda. You think propaganda is a fiction? You think there's no such thing? Or do you think that you're so aware that they couldn't possibly fool you? Because we're all dupable. You have to consider the context of how you get your information and how vulnerable you are to manipulation. You go to a magic show and you sit in the seat, you cannot possibly reverse engineer the illusions. The illusions are designed specifically to fool the people who are in the seats. If you wanted to see through the tricks, you'd have to go backstage, beneath the stage. You'd have to see from different angles. So we're given a selective view where you're not given enough information to know it to be real. You just have to kind of trust that they're not doing magic tricks on you. There's a lot of trust placed in it. But my point being, the fakery is a small percentage, but these tend to be the agenda setting stories. So for example, the airplane hitting the helicopter. So it wasn't just a tragedy. It was a chance to attack Trump for firing air traffic control, attack Musk. It was a chance for the right wing to blame female pilots and DEI. So a female pilot caused it to happen, is what they said. They said it with another one too. And then you had a Navy SEAL turned helicopter pilot who crashed, and he was black. So they called it DEI. Ann Coulter called it DEI. So the right wing gets to be accused of being racist. Meanwhile, the left wing is attacking Trump and Musk for downsizing government, firing people, and causing these disasters. So I'm saying that these fake stories create all kinds of ripples where people with their strong opinions go back and forth with the assumption that the thing was real. So that fake event is a major narrative driver. And if you look at the number of fake events that we continually discuss and the effect that they have, then it's impossible to ignore their influence on news at large and how that does become our history. So here we are living in a history infused with a bunch of fakery. So that's not for dispute. And if you're willing to entertain the notion that dinosaurs have been faked or that history is faked, then you should recognize that that's not separate from the faking of recent history through news. They make history through the news day by day. So it's continuous. So we can already note that the worldview that we collectively share is news bent. Doesn't mean it's fake, but it means that the consensus agreement over what happened is largely BS, propaganda. And the truth doesn't get reported. The media doesn't report on its own fakery. The alternative media operates like media itself. It's not critical of itself. It assumes that its vantage point is objective, and its followers also fall under its spell. So just to lay the groundwork here, I'm not saying everything's fake. But what I am pointing out is that media fakery exists, and we have to recognize this as a factor in every story, and we have to consider that the effects are cumulative. It's been going on forever. So now, beyond that, what we're pointing out with the entertainment is just that it is another arm of propaganda. What is the difference between news propaganda and entertainment propaganda? And what would make you think that there's any difference, since they're stemming from the same source? And what we keep pointing out is that there is a consistent overlap between the two that cannot be explained away as mere coincidence, and to refer to it as a synchronicity from the universe or simulation is fallacious. It's the divine fallacy. So the only logical, reasonable explanation is that our news-bent reality, our distorted history, is the product of our belief in what we're told is true, and our belief is informed by a frame of reference, which is also informed by the entertainment media that we all take in. Books, video games, everything is a part of it. Every venue, the music, it all ties into this. So what he said to me was this, because we're having this conversation about predictions, and I said, well, I'm pointing out how lots of what's happened on the world stage has been following what we have seen with the madness. So I'm not saying that people watching Netflix are robotically imitating what they see. That's not what I'm saying. And I'm not saying that the people have to be aware of these connections. No, I'm saying that they're just being exposed to ideas. It's a data dump. But he's asking me, could you not have forecasted and predicted how Elon would have been characterized in the media without watching the madness? No. Because the madness with specificity said, it didn't call him Elon Musk. I made this inference, and later it was talked about by a lot of reviewers, because that's obviously the intent. That's not even for dispute. But the thing I said was, according to this movie, there's a tech billionaire who helped steal the election, who's financing far-right neo-Nazis to commit extreme acts of violence. And this big bad CEO is based on Musk. And the thing is, after this came out, Musk does the Hitler salute. After this came out, Musk's car is called the swastika car, and he's compared with Hitler. So the Hitlerification of Elon Musk happened after this movie. Like, these things aren't, it's like the movie set this template that we were to expect. But it went beyond just this Musk character. It had elements of the left-wing Antifa rising up against the corporations, against the rich, in a class warfare context. And right after that series came out, you got Luigi, class warfare. And Luigi used a ghost gun. The characters in this show were manufacturing ghost guns. The anti-CEO rhetoric is very consistent. And then what's more, Musk was caught, people are tracing his tweets, communicating with certain neo-Nazi characters and dog whistling. Like the 14 flags when he retweeted the quote from Napoleon that Donald Trump tweeted that they were outraged about, because it said, he who saves his country breaks no laws. So if you remember back when that was happening, well, that had a direct correlation here, because the Musk character in that series was communicating with Brother 14, leader of the Forge, which is the movie counterpart to America First. So I'm looking at these overlapping characters. One of the characters is Lauren Jennings. She's a conspiracy theorist and an independent journalist. And she finds out that this tech CEO had tampered with the election. And when she tries to break the story, she gets killed. And I noted that Lauren Jennings and Laura Loomer are very similar characters. Like, there's these parallels. So I pointed this out. Months after I pointed this out, Laura Loomer says, because of what I'm exposing, I'm getting death threats from the NSA. And then she starts tweeting at Jack Dorsey, accusing him of election interference in 2020, and that the information is out there because Twitter is a crime scene and it's going to be exposed. So I'm like, that's interesting too. So then at the same time, Laura Loomer is being called out by various mainstream outlets as this crazy conspiracy theorist who's so crazy that she can't own a gun. So they're already throwing it out there that she's had potential threats of self-harm in the past. So I'm saying is that these world stage characters, and you can't say Musk isn't one. There's a dozen different ways we can point to now how these are actors on the world stage. Same applies for Laura Loomer. Loomer was the one who jumped on the stage in 2017, Julius Caesar in the park, where they were killing Caesar, but it was a guy dressed like Trump. She's the one who called out The Atlantic and Time Magazine for referencing the Trump assassination. And so she's been a part of this. I would say gatekeeping this particular psyop. So to answer the question, though, I'm not making these connections. Rather, I'm pointing out that there is a one-to-one tracking of, quote, reality and entertainment. But the key distinction here is that the reality that mirrors the entertainment is all the fake stuff. It's axiomatic to say all predictive and concurrent programming only references fake events. So once you recognize that it's only pointing out the fake stuff, that it only tracks with psyops, then you can take away all the talk about wizards and occultists and karma and satanic sacrifices and deep state murders, and you can get rid of all that MSM plus claptrap. So here's an article. A Netflix show dreamed up Luigi Mangione nearly 2 years before he allegedly killed the CEO. The article is called "What If Luigi Got Away?" Because in the movie, it's about this leader of this bad group dying. The CEO gets assassinated, but the killer, because he's a class warrior, is protected by the community. And this article, which came out in the Portland Mercury, was all about how if Luigi had only made it to Seattle, they would have protected him, like the character Munchie in The Madness. So what I'm saying here is that life follows art? No. Psyops follow entertainment. Psyops are entrained with the entertainment. And the fact that the movie was made a couple years before is further evidence of this. I have so many examples. I mean, look at A Man in Full, based on a Tom Wolfe novel, that they distorted the story for Netflix, where they made the main character Trump. Charlie Croker is Trump. And if you look at the breakdown of the characters, you can see these perfect overlaps. But they're throwing in real-time political messaging in movies that were produced a year or longer before the stuff actually happens. So when A Man in Full came out, there was a lot of talk about Barron Trump staying with his mom, and she's trying to protect him from Trump. You know, just drama, political soap opera. But that was the main thing in their relationship in this TV show. So the TV show comes out at the same time you have this crazy dynamic with Trump and Melania, which could all be fake. But I'm just pointing out that how could they have known? How could they have timed it? Now, there are a couple of other points. So the article says, yes, the Netflix dreamed up a Luigi. And I said, I only watched it. And he said, how do you decide what to focus on? Which is a valid question. How do I decide that this movie is relevant for its programming value? Well, one, I watched the Netflix one because it was the #1 trending movie. I'm not watching stuff because I like it. I'm watching it because it's trending and it's being force memed into the psyche, into the zeitgeist. I saw the trailer for Mickey 17. And just by watching the trailer, I said, look, I saw this character. He looked like Luigi, smiling with the hoodie. So this movie's going to contain something. It's going to have to. That's the model that we're using here. And I tested it. What happened? Well, you look into it. Mickey 17, which I haven't even seen yet, has a character played by Mark Ruffalo, who's based on Trump, who gives a xenophobic speech and survives an assassination attempt where a bullet grazes his head. So what do you call that? A coincidence? Because I can point to several movies with the same exact coincidence released at the same time, including Batman Caped Crusader, where Rupert Thorne has his right ear cut. And then, of course, you got Harrison Ford as a president getting shot at while he's at the podium. Came out the day before. So are these all mere coincidences? How do you explain these things? So the go-to explanation has been reach for the mystical, reach for magic, dark occultists. We're in a video game. Reach for unreality subjectivity, and a schizoid break from reality because nothing is real. Because if what we're shown on TV is fake, then reality's fake. See, that's called mistaking the map for the territory. And that's what they want. They want you to think that the Truman Show in your head is the real world. Nope. The Truman Show that they installed in your head contains a bunch of BS that you can just kind of prune. You can cut these things out. You don't need them. You don't need to be paranoid. You don't need to be afraid of 5G towers or ocean levels rising or alien invasions or planet killer asteroids or bowl cut shooters. All kinds of things I could name that are literally just hyperstitions and delusions. But what we have been arriving at here simply is that one of the ways that they hide the conditioning that goes into the psyops, into the fake news, one of the ways they hide it is they plant false narratives through big channels like InfoWars, where anytime you see a coincidence, invoke magic, invoke higher powers, and convince people that they're crazy. So then you go to your family and you're like, hey, I think we live in a video game simulation because this and this and that. And they're like, no, media is objective. These are mere coincidences. You just have apophenia. And it almost seems as though they have purposefully put ideas out there that would make one diagnosable. So if you start noticing the news is fake and it really becomes a focus of yours, at some point, they can just shut you up, like Laura Loomer. So I don't think it's a coincidence that Laura Loomer is represented in Netflix by a crazy conspiracy theorist, and she's being characterized as Laura Looney, a crazy conspiracy theorist who can't even own a gun, who's obsessed with Trump and jealous of Elon Musk. I mean, if you look at the storyline here, I think she's a character and a caricature of the conspiracy theorist, investigative journalist. And if life follows Netflix, this character may be the next. I kind of have this feeling just based on how they, I guess, recycle various psyops. I think that she might be the next Seth Rich, the DNC staffer. And that was a huge conspiracy, big talking point with QAnon types. But the idea that she's got too close to the truth, and so they had to take her out. So am I predicting? In as much as, Musk, if you look at his corresponding character, he gets taken out. Does it mean they literally take him out? Well, not coincidentally, shortly after the madness came out, images of Musk being shot at, death threats, the Cybertruck blowing up started proliferating. I was on Blue Sky. There were images of Musk with guns pointed at him. So all this anti-Musk stuff picked up right on time. And I think a lot of it's fake and agitated, provoked operatives. Like, are there really people burning Tesla dealerships, or are these psychological operations? But are they setting him up to be taken out? Well, I don't know. I mean, he certainly acts like it. You could consider a Cybertruck blowing up in front of Trump Tower as kind of a threat. So I would say that life is following art. Does it mean it ends that way? I don't know. It could be a public fall from grace. It could be losing Tesla. It doesn't have to be a literal death, but I don't know. With this Laura Loomer character in the show, she threatens to release some damaging information, which is her thing. She's been threatening powerful people. NSA, she says they've been threatening her, expletives in their threats, very dark stuff. So she is walking into the role of Lauren Jennings, and the character is killed with a nerve agent designed to look like a heart attack. But I have a few ideas of how it could work out if I were a writer, and we'll see. So one more question with JLB. I said, how do you explain all these coincidences? And he says, depends on what you mean by these coincidences. I've already explained in the past that my own content regarding submarines seemed to have predicted the Titan submersible story. But I predicted nothing, and I'm not an insider. And he brought this up when we last spoke, that he wrote an article that has some kind of a connection to the Titan submersible. And he says, so he's not an insider. So what do you call that? Well, you wouldn't call it predictive programming because it wasn't distributed by government-controlled propaganda outlets to a mass audience. So we can go ahead and separate the conversation of mass programming from personal coincidences or synchronicities. The conflating of the two is one of the main errors in trutherist thought. The truthers are conflating media synchronizations with synchronicity itself. These are two different things, but it's deliberate. I think there's been a deliberate attempt to conflate the two, but there is no reason to. I make the point of saying that we are the only objectivists on the world stage for a reason. Okay, now one more point on this, because I'm trying to break this down into the simplest terms, because we are regularly predicting predictive programming itself. So I watched this movie Sinners, and I'm saying, watch, this is going to correlate with the twins getting stabbed. And the main facet of the twins getting stabbed was the part where the twin, and you see this in the movie, you see this on the news, where one of the twins, Hunter, is crying, talking about how his brother Austin died bleeding in his arms. So I'm like, okay, twins, one of them dies bleeding in the other's arms, and then it's been thrown into this racialized context. So in the movie, yeah, you got the white Klan's vampires killing one of the twins who literally bleeds to death in the other guy's arms. So that's a coincidence, I guess, that the theme has an overlap and this scene has an overlap, like this very significant death. But how was I able to predict that, is what I'm saying. I shouldn't be able to walk into a movie knowing that because of the context of the release and who's behind it and the directors, that it's going to correlate with an ongoing psyop. So what does this mean? It means A, I'm psychic. B, I'm channeling information from a higher power. Or C, we have correctly correlated the information, and that there is a deliberate synchronization between entertainment, propaganda, and fake news. Now, as to the why, because people don't understand, well, why? What is the why here? Again, think about marketing and propaganda and getting our pre-acceptance for some news event, getting us to jump on. Like, there's a reason why there's this reflexive response. This was caused by DEI. No, this was caused by anti-government extremists defunding these departments. There's a reason why people go down predictable narratives every single time. So as to the why, it's propaganda, manipulation, and advertising. Because as long as we go with the fake news unquestioningly, then the news vendors get to write our history day by day. If you can write history, you have the ultimate control. We are living in a mass Truman Show. And a lot of this started with this. And I just want to show you how this works, because I was watching Fallout, and I said, I'm going to watch Fallout because it's going to contain predictive programming for what's coming next. And I say this for a lot of reasons. One of them is the director. So you've got Christopher and Jonathan Nolan heavily represented in creating movies that overlap with fake news events. The Batman stuff, the Oppenheimer stuff, it's all there. Fallout, I was watching it because I said, look, Fallout. Jonathan Nolan, he also did Westworld, which had a lot of 3/11 pandemic stuff. So I'm watching with this intent. I'm like, I'm going to watch Fallout because it's going to contain relevant predictive programming. It has all the usual interesting stuff. You know, the intro scene is in Vault 33. So I'm watching the scene where you have this disputed election, a stolen election, and this character named Betty Pearson, black female, takes over Vault 33. And I thought, okay, this looks like some kind of a stand-in for Kamala Harris. And she does this thing where she orchestrates this takeover. And so I'm like, okay, this is interesting. You have the stolen election concept. But part of this takeover was a massacre in this vault. And they clean everything up. But I'm watching it, and as they're exiting the scene, they focus on the foosball table because they forgot one drop of blood. And that one drop of blood is on a foosball character on the right side of his head. And it's one frame. But I'm watching these things critically, and I recognize that nothing is put in your frame of reference if you're not meant to see it. And just because you don't consciously recognize it doesn't mean you're not perceiving it, that it's not going into the collection, in that folder in your memory banks to be tapped into later. So I pause it and I say, this looks like Donald Trump to me. Now, mind you, this was a couple of months before the Trump head wound on the right side of his head, the blood on his face. So I said, okay, you got Kamala, you got Trump, you got this dynamic of a stolen election. This looks to me like further evidence that they're going to do some kind of Trump head wound. And again, this was before. So am I reaching with this? Well, no, I made the inference based upon all the context. So again, he's incredulous. And so he says, we're still waiting for some evidence that blood on the foosball player equals Trump's head. So I understand the incredulity. I arrived at it through context, but I didn't know this. And Synchromorpheus brought this out for me, because here's what I said. I said it's symbolism. For example, HBO The Boys. The Homelander represents Trump, not a secret. Mickey 17, Ruffalo's character, is Trump. So beyond mere social criticism, these characters are performing in these scenes that are building up for this incoming assassination attempt. And I said here, whether or not you believe in predictive programming is immaterial to the fact that these are alignments, specifically the synchronized release of these various films. Now, interestingly enough, I told you how I arrived at this being Trump. Synchromorpheus found that the foosball character is actually a Fallout character called Vault Boy. And Vault Boy has been memed as Donald Trump as far back as 2018. So I didn't know anything about this foosball character. I'm just reading it from context. So again, what we have here is this. You've got Vault Boy is the foosball player. Memed as Donald Trump. You see him on a bunch of shirts. The overseer of Vault 33. And there was a couple of other things about this, but basically there's like an article how Fallout has all these various little, what you'd call Easter eggs. So again, I'm just pointing out that Vault Boy equals Trump equals foosball character, blood on the side of the head, Betty Pearson, and it goes even deeper when we go into the layering here. So again, what are these? Are these coincidences? So his question is valid. How does the foosball character represent the Vault Boy character? Was a valid question. And the answer was the directors put it there as an Easter egg. Even without that, I could have made this connection. So what I'm pointing out again is simply that we're not cherry picking. We're just looking at media holistically as a gestalt, as it all creates the zeitgeist. A couple of other things. I found an article on Reddit. People were talking about Final Destination. Final Destination came out before 9/11. So a number of people are discussing it. And I didn't know this. While filming Dr. Strangelove, Kubrick got a visit from the FBI and Air Force intelligence because the bombing sites were top secret, and the ones that he used were too close to the real thing. He called the prop master, and anyway, that's intriguing in itself because Dr. Strangelove, like all of Kubrick's films, has these connections to conspiracies. They're all like that. It's interesting. In fact, Dr. Strangelove really was about the fluoride in the water, communist mind control conspiracy. So it's interesting that Kubrick is so well represented in the conspiracy realm with like Apollo 11, which again isn't all of it. His movies contain foreshadowing for many things beyond just 9/11 and Apollo and JFK. And okay, here we go. I saw what death was about to do. We talked about this already. Just analyzing a movie that comes out next month by its trailer, Final Destination Bloodlines. It all starts with a prophecy about the Space Needle blowing up and somebody preventing it. So then 9/11 happens, or a plane blows up, and then they get hunted down by death. Okay, let's move on. Going through my notes. Jaron Campanella said, I sent Dave Weiss an email and he blocked me on all platforms, like the transparent man he is. You know, like the 10-year friend you had that went on a trip and came back to people no longer saying his name, but just the letter. You know, you never called that friend once, but made up lies about him and blocked him. Yes, Jaron and Dearth are on opposite sides because Jaron has become a full-on, Glober, which is fine. We're talking about the model that best explains observations. But my question is, does he believe, beyond just the shape, does he believe that the land masses are all represented on the globe? Braveheart84 says, I just realized Donald Trump played the rich villain kid's dad in Little Rascals remake. His car looked like a rocket with a W on it. It's kind of interesting to look back at how much attention and media coverage Donald Trump has had his entire career, as a real estate mogul. 33 years before he ran for office, he's on Oprah Winfrey talking about becoming president. He's been a very public figure, but he's always been a character. He's always been a facet of this big show. And it's all been leading up to this. He's not random. In my view, there's no reason to think that there's anything random about him. You wouldn't say that somebody randomly went to school and got a gig as a crisis actor and performed in a fake shooting. It doesn't work that way. These things are conducted by essentially a production crew that's a closed movie set. There's no randoms in there. And so when you look at someone like Trump, he's just a crisis actor, a glorified crisis actor who's been doing it his whole life. And you can find evidences of Trump existing in various characters in the movies before he existed in these various forms. We talked about Trackdown from 1958 that even predicted his arrest. But more recently, and this is like with Musk, this is with Trump, this is with many other characters, but I think it's safe to say that these are what you call lifetime actors. And their job is to merge real and fake, to steer things. Because it's not just that they're writing history. I mean, you can't just write it and publish it. It has to be performed. Like this happened. Okay, NPR, the school shootings that weren't. Sure, they got away with it for a couple of years. 240 school shootings being reported, but somebody investigated. They didn't actually have a psyop on the news to correspond with it. There was no evidence to actually support the claim. So they have to act out these events. And the major players on the world stage have these parallel existences. I mean, we often talk about the Trump headwind thinks it's one of the latest and greatest examples of this that is irrefutable. Look at Machete. And the only reason that we look back to Machete was because I said there's no way Robert De Niro is outside the Trump trial exhibiting Trump derangement syndrome on the random. There's no way. One, because of his various roles. Again, he was Travis Bickle, who inspired the guy that shot Reagan. Travis Bickle, an inspiration for the Joker, as was Kings of Comedy. But so De Niro has some connection to this theme of presidential assassination. Then we see him in Machete from 2010, before Trump was in politics. De Niro's playing a character who essentially acted out what happened to Trump. He's giving a xenophobic speech and he's shot at while he's at the podium. The exact speech Trump was giving. He points to the sign that says too many immigrants. And while he's pointing at the sign, he gets shot at. This overlapping of world stage actors, crisis actors, politicians, celebrities, and their counterparts in media are pretty easy to see when you know what you're looking at and you recognize it's not random, but it's structural. One of the greater examples I've come across has been that in every, this is crazy. I mean, it's not crazy. It's true. So I'm looking closer at these instances of conspicuously timed released movies with an assassination attempt, all the ones that correspond with the real thing. and I'm looking at the actors in particular. And one thing that I find to be fascinating is that the same actor is represented in 3 of these very prominently, but the same dynamic is evidenced in all of them. So in Megalopolis, which came out last summer, the summer of the shooting, the character Caesar, obviously an allusion to Trump, but his antagonist who orchestrates the assassination attempt is the same actor who's the antagonist in Captain America, where the president gets shot at, and this was released the day before Trump was shot at, so they changed the trailer. Same actor, same antagonist. Same actor, same antagonist in The Boys, where the Homelander assassination run season finale had to be changed because it's so closely aligned with what just happened. And the antagonist of the Homelander is the same actor as the guy in Megalopolis and Captain America. And this character, this actor is playing in all these instances would seemingly correspond with Barack Obama. So there's a dynamic between Trump and Obama that is being played out in the movies and on the world stage. And it all ties in, and I can point to reasons why I'm asserting this. It all ties in to their relationships to 2 distinct worldviews that are clashing, represented by 1776 and 1619. Obama, 1619 on one side, Trump, 1776 on the other. These polls are being referenced with these characters in the movies and what they actually represent. Not a coincidence that Leave the World Behind is an Obama production released on 11/22. It's a reoccurring theme. It's a pattern. And you could say these are just coincidences or it's typecasting. Sure, it's definitely coincidental. It's definitely typecasting. But then how do you explain the timing of these releases with the quote real event in every instance? And I've got a list of these instances of concurrent messaging. So we live in a vast echo chamber. That's the model I'm describing. I'm saying that our internalized view of the world that the consensus shares, this model contains nothing but influence operations. Every movie, every book, apart from its use in entertainment, does contain worldview reinforcement, preconditioning for some incoming fake event. Why do you think so many truthers are very comfortable saying that they're going to fake an alien invasion in the future? Well, it's because we've been inundated with stuff for so long. Okay, so we talked about this one, Sinners, directed by Ryan Coogler, 2025 supernatural horror film set in the 1930s Mississippi that uses the vampire mythos as a vehicle for exploring complex racial and historical themes. And the significance there has a lot to do with Jordan, Michael B. Jordan and Jordan Peele, and this use of movies to comment on real events. So the fact that Nope was inspired by the George Floyd event is interesting for a couple of reasons. One, the event was fake. So are you telling me that a psyop inspired this movie? I mean, it's not unbelievable, but I think it's interesting because when you look deeper, it would actually seem that these movies that tie into the psyops are created consciously with the knowing participation of the directors. Like Leave the World Behind, for example. The guy who wrote the book smirked when he was told, or they were talking about how his book was prescient because the book predicted 2020. You can find the articles on this, but the movie itself was often pointed to as having predicted a lot of what followed after it. But the fact that President Obama, produced it is a slam dunk that this is truly man-directed synchronization with entertainment and news. You can't blame it on the universe because if anybody's in on the big psyop entertainment complex, it's the presidents. You can't be this high in politics and not know how things work on some level. I mean, sure, they're compartmentalized, but you can rule out being out of the inner circle on these things with a lot of these events quite easily. So here's an article that recently came out, WrestleMania Presidency, how professional wrestling explains Donald Trump's Washington. Now, this is interesting. Vince McMahon was quick to realize Trump's skills could be put to use in the political arena. He said, quote, Donald Trump might very well be a great president of the United States. This is back in 2013 when Trump was inducted into the Hall of Fame, the WWE Hall of Fame. It says, was this prescient or just kayfabe in practice? Trump lives and dies by kayfabe, where friend and foe alike never seem to know what's real and what's for show. Just ask Republicans explaining themselves in a circle on every recent tariff move. Perhaps the person to only more fully embody kayfabe is wrestling impresario Vince McMahon himself. McMahon and his wife, Linda, have been significant financial supporters of Trump's political career. Linda McMahon served as Trump's first small business association head, and now is his Secretary of Education. So this connection between Trump and wrestling is fascinating for a few reasons. Trump's connection with wrestling goes way back, but the Hall of Fame thing is also fascinating when you look at how Trump was at the RNC with a bandage on his ear when fellow Hall of Famer Hulk Hogan was on the stage comparing the assassination attempt to Hulkamania. He said, at Hulkamania, I was on stage bleeding on my head looking down at Donald Trump, and then I won Hulkamania. And then he compares it to Trump on the stage, bleeding, looking down, and he goes on to win Trumpamania. So that Hulk speech there was fascinating because of the fact that we're talking about fake blood on Hogan's head being compared to what Trump did. So in a way, I think it was kind of a, when Trump blew him a kiss at that point, I kind of thought, okay, it's one Hall of Famer to the other. He was blading. He cut his own ear like wrestlers do. That's how Hulk Hogan bleeds. And that's how his face is bloody because they cut themselves with little razors, which is likely what Trump had done. And this Hulk thing is interesting for the reason, too, that this Harrison Ford as president in Captain America, again, a Marvel trailer had to change because it came out the day before the shooting. And on the trailer, he's getting shot and he's the president. Well, he becomes the Red Hulk. So that you have the shooting connection, and now you've got the President Red Hulk, which makes me think MAGA, like full-blown extremist MAGA, Trump in his final form. And then add to this, Mickey 17, Mark Ruffalo plays Trump, who get a Trump-esque character who gets grazed by a bullet, and he's the actor who plays the Green Hulk. So I'm not sure what this all means, but I'm just pointing out these connections. All right, let's move on. I was just bringing up the phrase kayfabe and fakery. I mean, fakery is intrinsic to wrestling entertainment. And we're supposed to think that it's not intrinsic to politics or news. I looked into it. Kate Perry released an album and she's about to go on tour. I noticed how she was talking about her higher self and her inner space journey. But her album, which just came out, is 33 minutes long. And someone, I think it was Russian Vids has a video, or Ukraine Vids, he updated it. He pointed out in his video here that the mission said T033 on the screen and light this candle before she goes up. And I checked, her album's called Woman's World, which if you really want to read into it, WW33, 33 minutes long. So there's a lot there if you want to unpack, if you want to go into the weeds with the symbolism. I don't think it's a coincidence. They say to escape this earth, you have to go the escape velocity, 7 times the speed of sound. No, 33 times the speed of sound. So Mach 33. Mach 33. We already talked about how Jaron sees the curve, no big deal, but this came across one of my comment sections. sudden case of red pilling 2664. He says, listen to Flat Earth Dave's interview with Bruce McGuire a few weeks ago. He said the last time he heard from Jaron, he texted a group of them and said, quote, no need to talk. I got myself into something and I don't know what to do. So according to David Weiss, and I haven't checked out this interview yet, he's suggesting, insinuating that Jaron's compromised. But then he also said that they bought Patty Steer a house and a car or something to get them to go flat or to go ball. Okay, let's see what else we've got here. Going through my notes. Let's go on over to my X feed. I've been having such a more pleasant experience on X ever since I started blocking the word chemtrails. Like the chemtrail engagement farmers are just the worst. I mean, really, it's like the fentanyl of the conspiracy candy. Like, you know, people are into conspiracies, but they're given the stuff that's just so mind-numbingly dumb and debunked. And they're outraged at cirrus clouds and can't be bothered to entertain the hypothetical they might be wrong and to look into the predictability of contrails and try to reconcile that with the unpredictability of so-called chemical trails. All right, moving on. We talked about Austin Metcalf, Wiz Khalifa. So look at this. This is a typical take from what you consider to be an alternative media type. So this alternative media guy, he's on the left, so he's more woke. But he's willing to call this fake. He circles an image of Trump's ear and he says 2 people died for this stunt. So he's right and he's wrong. This is why I say you cannot bother trying to debate with or try to convert wokesters or even normies, because they can't be right. You can't have the right answers if you're still framing your answers within the big box with all of its built-in presuppositions. So in this case, they assume the media is objectively reporting. Like, so CNN's guy is recording, you got Fox, they're just recording and we're watching and stuff is happening. No, they're not recording, they're producing. They're manipulating, they're lying. You know, lying and talking look the same, but they have different effects. And in this case, they're visually lying to us. This was a magic trick. You know, you go to a magic show and the magician on the stage does some little trick and his thumb comes off and everybody's just wowed by it. Yeah, it's just a trick. But you can't tell it's fake from where you're sitting. In this case, without any additional context, you wouldn't know how it's faked. And most people don't have the expanded context. Their nose is pressed up against the screen. They don't suspend judgment, and their judgment is not informed by years of media analysis from a skeptical perspective. So we have an unfair advantage. That's why we don't fall for everything like a bunch of dupes. So in this case, James Tate is a dupe. He's correct that it was a stunt. But why does he stick with the idea that 2 people died? Because his built-in frame of reference is that media tells the truth, that the camera is not lying. It doesn't occur to them that it could be fake, because to do so would require an entire reframe. Because now both sides of the media are collaborating in a hoax. And you can't go there if you're in the political horseshoe. If you lean right, lean left, you're not going to be able to come up with the right responses. You might say, yeah, that's fake, but you won't arrive at the entirety of it. And it makes a big difference. But this is a common take. They're saying, yeah, he faked it, but some people died. So they can't go all the way. It's that whole thing where the scale of the fakery escapes them, so they'll never get the big picture. But the big picture is, yes, that was faked, but the shooter didn't die either. The fireman didn't die. But you have to follow this. Like, if they faked it, then what? Well, it means that the news media were liars. It means the people behind Trump in the stands were likely all in on it. The Secret Service would have to have been in on it. So you got the Secret Service in on it, the people behind him. You could say that the AP photographer that photographed the bullet going by Trump's ear must have been in on it. That picture had to have been fake. He photographed the bullet. What kind of camera? What was the shutter speed? Why would you have such a camera? I mean, that's an impossibility. But that's the same photographer who photographed the Secret Service agent whispering into George Bush's ear on 9/11. So think about the symbolism there too. The ear, whispering in the ear, bullet by the ear, same photographer. There's a esoteric meaning to it, I think, here. But without even getting into that, same photographer, previous PSYOP. These are closed sets. If you're part of the production company, production crew, the PSYOP entertainment complex, you're creating propaganda. We're talking about propagandists, AP, associated propagandists. But anyway, James Tate on the left can't see the big picture. He can't see the forest for the tree. He's missing the forest for the trees because he's seeing this as a stunt taking place against a backdrop of stuff that's real, like a hoax. No, it's not a hoax. It's a psychological operation. It's a influence operation that, in addition to including Secret Service and the media present and the people behind him, this means unequivocally that Donald Trump, President Donald Trump, is a crisis actor. That means this. That is something the MAGAs can't take. The MAGAs can't go that far because this would imply that their guy's a liar and they are all fools. And when he kissed the helmet of the fireman, he knew it was bullshit just to program the weak-minded people. This would also mean if the fireman didn't die, then his family are a bunch of liars. The funeral home, the funeral services, all a ruse, a hoax, a farce. So if you follow this, just the logic here, the scale of the fakery is so much bigger than he did it to score some political points and win an election. No, this is a history-shaping PSYOP. They make history. And they're not making it up as they go. I would argue that the dozens of examples of predictive programming leading up to it that had us talking about it the day it happened, before it happened, presupposes that this was not random. This was planned before he was elected, even on the first term. If you want to look back at the body of programming leading us to this, this is something that is written into this character, and it's not random, and there's still more to it. So looking at the media as a mirror of what's really happening and looking to the past as a predictive model, you can arrive at certain certainties. You can find certain things that are pretty much guaranteed to happen. I recall after watching a few movies and seeing certain patterns, when I binge watched everything sci-fi on Netflix, I said, watch, space junk is next, stuff falling from space, becoming commonplace and normalized. And that has happened to the point where the FAA and others have talked about this. We have to divert flights because of space junk sightings. But this stuff all happened after first being heavily inundated into entertainment and news and video games. They get you to believe stuff in advance. And this is actually a certain type of marketing, or manipulation, suggestibility. It's how the Mandela effect works. It's about creating a context. So the Mandela effect creates false memories or informs your frame of reference in such a way that you believe something very readily. An example is, there was a video I had shown more than once of a psychiatrist talking about how she had a poster on her wall from Disneyland, but this poster had been tampered with. She added Warner Brothers characters that would never be seen in Disneyland. And one of her tests here was just to show how you can unconsciously influence somebody by putting things into their frame of reference that aren't really there, that shouldn't be there. and that this will inform their memories. So in this example, she would ask people about their trips to Disneyland, and she would be able to ask them, well, did you see Bugs Bunny? And they say, yeah. Can you describe him? Yeah, big fluffy tail, big plush carrot. And they would describe Bugs Bunny. Bugs Bunny's never been in Disneyland, but the poster behind her had Bugs Bunny in Disneyland. So the person manufactured a memory based upon a real memory, but this memory has been tampered with. That's how Mandela effect works. It's called the misinformation effect. The misinformation effect is well understood, well documented. The Innocence Project has documented countless examples of individuals being wrongfully convicted because of faulty eyewitness testimony, where the testimony was informed or misinformed by the interrogators, by the police, by the investigators. So the framing of questions influences the types of memories you recollect, or it's called retroactive interference. So there's no difference between the phenomenon of the misinformation effect, the Mandela effect, and the suggestibility that someone is I guess living with whenever they're absorbed with entertainment. It's just they're putting things in your head. Another example of this is the will to believe, your cognitive bias, your prejudices that also dictate how you interpret things. This is why right-wingers are so quick now to blame everything on DEI. It's been put out there. It's been put in the frame of reference. Oh, helicopter crash, DEI. Plane crash, DEI. President gets shot, DEI. Women go to space and it's fake, DEI. So it's consistent, and you can just look at real-time influence operations in the form of movies. But another example of this, I heard this anecdote of this couple that went out into the woods. They went camping, and one of them believed in Bigfoot. The other did not. They all heard noise at night in the woods. And one person said it was Sasquatch. The other person said it was raccoons. Well, who was correct? Well, obviously the raccoon. The person who said the raccoons were making the noise is correct. Or it was a deer. Or it was another hiker. But we can rule out Bigfoot. Why? Because Bigfoot has never been demonstrated to exist. It never should have been placed in the frame of reference. If you have a multiple choice, what did you hear in the woods last night? A, B, C, D, squirrel, deer, another camper, or Bigfoot. It's an invalid question. D is non sequitur. It shouldn't be in the realm of possibility. But to a believer, it's there. So in the believer's simulation that they've internalized in their version of the world, in their map, Bigfoot's a possibility. For a believer, every light in the sky, every plane might be a UFO. Well, this is kind of what I think we're experiencing when it comes to how people process fake news. They're given a frame of reference where all these things are in their head because of what they're absorbed with in these echo chambers, and then something happens on the news that just happens to match it, and it seems like a foregone conclusion. German Anarchist 2 says, is this the Diddy party? I don't know what you mean, but Ye was defending Diddy, and recently Ye came out with some very disturbing stuff. Well, I don't know if it's disturbing or if it's just too much information. Yeah, actually, it's both. But yeah, he put out the song called Cousins, and I don't know what his deal is. Is he trying to like jump the shark as a marketing strategy? I mean, he's not going to endear himself to his audiences by continually destroying his image or just going for extreme shock. But this last bit might have been a step too far, but I don't know. I mean, he's represented by Milo's talent agency, and Milo kind of had a falling off of the world stage and loss in popularity after saying something very similar. But the Ye character has been intriguing for a few reasons. I was talking about the significance of his 2013 song, Black Skinhead, and how it seemed to predict the trajectory that his character would be taking. And then when he started doing these very elaborate record releases like Dawn Day and Dawn Day 2, where he comes out burning out of that house. We were looking very closely at the subtext of it. Very interesting stuff. Van Gogh says, I can't tell anyone I used to like his music anymore. It's too embarrassing. I never really listened to him, but I looked at his association with Candace Owens, White Lives Matter, this black skinhead thing, and this picture began to emerge. And I think it's all contrived. I don't know, though, how loose of a cannon he is, or is he an insider? I got these doubts. Like sometimes I wonder if he might not really be in a Truman Show, like totally handled. There's all these accounts of handlers in his life, like the personal trainer who threatened to zombify him so he couldn't see his kids, some doctor working to get him hooked on like laughing gas. So sometimes I look at Ye and it's like, this guy is likely, it's possible that he's not fully aware. Like, some people are perhaps born into these inner circles, intelligence, connected families. I'm not sure. Wasn't his father like a Black Panther and big in media? Like a report, I have to look into it. But sometimes he seems like very unaware, like he could be handled. Another one, Pete Davidson. We talked about Pete Davidson because he and Ye had that contention a few years back. And Pete Davidson's father died on September 11th at the age of 33. And I have this wiki I'm working on of all the various celebrities who almost died on 9/11, or the conspicuous uses of symbolism and numerology, like we point out with these various events. But there was an interview with Pete Davidson where he indicated that he possibly doesn't know it was fake. He said that he was followed around by psychiatrists from Columbia University throughout his life who would periodically ask him if he really believes his father is dead. And he said it was a really effed up thing to ask him. And I'm like, yeah, of course, that's a messed up thing. But so maybe he's not in the know. And so it's kind of interesting to think about how easy that could be the case. And you can look at the various events these people are part of to kind of arrive at a level of, how much in the know they possibly are. Like Trump faking a head wound cements the fact that he is an appendage of the mass mind control operation. He's not fighting against the system. And some people think Musk is. He's a savior. He's saving the West. He's saving free speech. That's risible. That's ridiculous. Copaesthetic says, Candace Owens attacked Jordan Peterson over his recent Joe Rogan interview. Not a coincidence, I think. I'll have to take a look. Candace Owens seems to be filling a certain niche where they used to be accepted in media, and now they have street cred because they got kicked out for being too truthy. And then they say really wild and outrageous stuff and contaminate the field for serious discourse. Remember, David Icke was a respected sports commentator. He was in the Green Party. And then he suddenly went conspiratorial and started talking about New Age stuff. He was a son of God. And then later he got into reptilians. And he was really ridiculed and mocked by mass media because of his conspiracies that he got into. But he had more credibility with people because he was an insider who said too much and they had to get rid of him. So Candace Owens has a similar trajectory where she's part of the Daily Wire. Now, then suddenly she starts speaking out against Israel and they kick her out. So that gives her credibility with the anti-Israel types who now see, because they hate Ben Shapiro. And now she's got some credibility with them, but then she gets to throw out all kinds of insanity into the mix. And she's always been a parody of extremism, even with the Daily Wire. I'm pretty sure the Daily Wire used her to say things, opinions, that if said by a white male would be considered sexist and racist. So they're playing a lot of mind games here. Not a coincidence that she and Ye did White Lives Matter. Like, why would white lives matter be represented by blacks? Why would Ye adopt the trappings of the Klan and neo-Nazis? It's all very inverted. And I think it's intentional. It's some kind of diffusion, perhaps. I'm going to have to watch the new Peterson-Rogan interview and catch up on that. I think yeah, that's right. He did allude to her, and so there's some back and forth there. She was also going after Matt Walsh, who believes in Apollo 11 as a great achievement. I mean, she is a bomb thrower. A lot of what she says is valid, but it's like this person who says that Trump faked his ear wound and people died. It's like she can't possibly arrive at the correct answers, even if she occasionally is right or gets some certain facts right. And that's the point. It's a limited hangout operation. You leak some facts, get some credibility, but then you flood it with a lot of lies and you control the narratives. She'll say, yeah, the moon landing was fake, but the space station's real. Well, yeah, okay, it's safe to talk about a 60-year-old conspiracy where nobody cares and it's been totally nullified, but you can't talk about people who are in space right now. You can't talk about the real-time hoaxes. See, that is gatekeeping. She'll never do it. Sean Hamer says, David Icke's Truth Vibrations is Blavatsky's secret doctrine rebranded. I think he still works for the DBC. Right. Well, that's another thing, too. Icke is one of those individuals who would point to a big event like a 9/11, and he would say, oh, this was a mass blood sacrifice to the reptilians. Or the school shooters were MK Ultra mind-controlled assassins. And this type of thinking hides the fakery. This is classic textbook MSM+. Some people are going to detect bullshit. So give them some other stuff to chew on. They reflexively reject mainstream, so throw breadcrumbs in alt media. And one of the marketing tactics that you see is the discover thing. You know, marketers like to let you discover it. So if somebody finds it for themselves or they think that they arrived at something without being coerced, they're more likely to accept it. Truthers will not be spoon-fed from Big Brother, but they will eat breadcrumbs off the floor because they found it themselves. And so what they do is they scatter conspiracy trails for people to follow if they don't accept the mainstream fare. So David Icke disseminates a lot of that stuff and always has. So instead of people saying this stuff was all fake, it's like, no, this was mind-controlled assassins and it was a satanic sacrifice. And they hint at stuff in movies because the dark diabolical wizards like to absolve themselves of karma by getting your consent. Mysticism, mumbo jumbo. Subjective synchronicities conflated with entertainment stuff. Like, no, that's madness. And again, it's cognitive sabotage. I mean, look at the diagnostic criteria for schizophrenia and then compare it to the reasoning of conspiracy theorists. You know, paranoid about 5G towers. Like, these things might be innocuous, you know, chemtrails, underground bases, aliens, like to a point it's innocuous. But at the same time, it's diagnosable stuff that you could just be written off. Oh, well, that's apophenia. Or that's just somebody suffering from delusion. It's very easy to discredit people with stuff like that. What you can't discredit are, I think, perspectives that are critical and skeptical and subtractive, as in refusing to believe things that they cannot substantiate. But non-believers don't have a platform on the world stage. See, Candace Owens, we're talking about her. She's not a non-believer. She's an alternative believer. She automatically believes the alternative stuff. And that's the anti. I say that we have to take the position of anti-anti, but also anti-pro. So the anti-position oppose the mainstream, and they assume that because they're opposing the mainstream, they are therefore the truth. Liars and truthers. But no, that's not how it works. You've got to be anti, and anti-pro. If you line up with the antis, you're in a controlled dialectic and a rigged game, and you can't possibly win. You can't possibly arrive at the truth. You'll see the obvious. Yeah, obviously that Trump ear wound is fake, but somebody there died. Nope. And as long as you operate with that presupposition that the media is reporting and they're objectively reporting, but it's just a fight over opinions, as long as you're not inclusive in your perspective of media fakery, you couldn't arrive at the idea that, no, actually, the shooter didn't even die. The whole thing was staged and fake. And this, again, I'm just bringing it up again, NPR uncovered 230 school shootings that didn't really happen because the passive, complacent news consumers just accept everything as real. So here's a pretty good video from someone, but this is typical. Now, I don't disagree with this person. She's talking about how the leftists are continually baited with outrage, and this defines their approach to politics.
Isn't it interesting to see how easily manipulated liberal people are? So it started off screaming their heads off about reproductive rights, no longer trending. So then they moved on to target Elon Musk. And now, because that's no longer trending with mainstream media, guess what they're all talking about now and being outraged by? Yeah, that Maryland father is now due process. And they don't even see the fact that mainstream media's whole intention is to get you emotionally riled up so that they can control you. And the liberal people just fall for the trap every single time. Why do you guys always have to have some sort of outrage that you're protesting against?
Okay, now that's valid. It is valid to criticize the left about being continually baited, outraged, and puppeteered by the mainstream media. That's true. But what this person doesn't recognize, because they're in the political horseshoe, is that alternative media similarly baits their own side, generates outrage after outrage, and keeps them plugged in just as much. It's a bifurcated system, left and right. So it's alt woke and woke. I call it right-wing wokeism or alternative woke. It's quite literally the same thing. Okay, so here's the Jordan Peterson thing. I'll have to listen to this later. I guess he called her a psychopath, which you can't really diagnose people long distance over the internet like that. Candace Owens, by the way, in my opinion, she's a PO, a parody of extremism. She's paid to spout these things. She doesn't believe this stuff. And I don't know the full extent of it, but I know she was somewhat involved in the final experiment with Antarctica, or her producer was, which is like, to me, that's kind of strange that she still espouses skepticism about NASA and stuff, but we'll see. There's a documentary coming out soon, I believe, about the trip to Antarctica. All right, I'm just scrolling through my notes. The Pope died. Klaus Schwab steps down, both 88. Maybe it's interesting. This article, this news agency here says the Pope had horrific visions of demons trying to drag him to hell, says the Vatican. I don't know if this is real or not.
Posed by the beclawed, soul-eating demons from hell. A spokes-cardinal confirmed that the pontiff had to be sedated last night after screaming, "Get these evil bastards off of me," as a portal to hell opened up at the...
Okay, portal to hell opened up. I don't know if that's true. I kind of doubt it. I'm even skeptical about the exact death date. We have climate activists being arrested for vandalizing Tesla. I'm only pointing this out because there's a connection between the class warfare and environmentalism. There's an overlap here. And they use environmentalism to advance a political agenda that's really about reshaping our economy and all this stuff. But the thing that the right misses, and this is clever on behalf of the programmers, is that the space program is synonymous with environmentalism, with the green agenda and climate activism, and the same goals. So the idea that Musk is somehow on the side of freedom and saving the West and all that, no, not really. He's on Team Greta. The space program is how they sell this idea and this ideology to people who love freedom, so that they gradually come to accept that freedom eventually leads to Mars bases where you can't go anywhere, can't have any property with you from Earth, and it's a closed system where you can't even go to the surface till you've terraformed it, and they recycle everything, including your body fluids, to make Martian concrete. Okay, so one theme. I like to talk about concerted messaging, themes, at the same time. What is being projected? And so the twin theme was kind of significant here, because we talk about twins. What is the significance of twins in this movie? The twins getting stabbed, and then the twin heads of World Economic Forum and the papacy, both 88, similar archetypes, leaving at the same time. So this twin thing keeps standing out to me. And then I see this at the same time in Australia, trending the in sync twins, where a carjacking happened and 2 eyewitnesses are twins. And they're getting all this attention because they speak at the same time and they say the same thing. So they call them the in sync twins.
Fine.
she can handle anything. That's amazing. How are you both recovering from it all? It must be a traumatic time.
Yeah, yes, it was. That's the time it was. Yeah, we just wanted to run for our safety, but in the back of our minds, we were worried about Mum.
Okay, so they talk in sync. And I'm just pointing this out because this is, again, very popular. And this twin theme kind of stood out to me. I'm not sure what to make of it, but again, I like to just take note. Boston student 19 charged with firebombing a Tesla dealership in Kansas City. So we've got another Luigi, and this would not have happened. Like this could be real. I'm not sure. Sometimes I think that these are like, this could be an actress. This could be an activist. This could be a crisis actor. I think the people who key the things are likely real, but the ones that are given a lot of attention and they're charged with terrorism and stuff, I think these could be fake. And I say so because this is part of the madness, the uprising of an army of Luigis fighting against the big bad CEO. And in the movie, of course, it was a tech billionaire. In this case, it's Musk. Okay, what else do we have here? Texas judge who cut Carmelo Anthony's bond had her front door smashed in by a black man in a MAGA hat. Yeah, so Carmelo Anthony, the stabber, goes free, and they're claiming that the family is being targeted with death threats and the like. The judge who cut the bond was attacked by someone in a MAGA hat. Again, it's all intriguing. Like, okay, a black guy in a MAGA hat, not unheard of necessarily, but this psyop has been made all about this character represented as like a white Trayvon Martin. They're trying to stir something up with it. So I find this to be kind of interesting. Just what is the meaning behind this? And someone else drove him to it. And wouldn't you expect that a judge is going to have a door camera, a doorbell camera, and then wearing a MAGA hat? Oh, that's interesting. So I saw this today. The channel has 184,000 followers. So I'm reading the story because there's an attempt here to engineer perceptions. So this video has been viewed how many times? 306,000. So a lot of people are reading this, myself included. I'm like looking at all this information. Well, just a couple of hours ago, a note was added to it. This video is from a different incident, and someone has placed the judge and Carmelo's face over it, and then it's being spread. So I've been taking note of big channels with huge followings that spread what I call truther bait, where they pre-package something so it appears to have been vetted. You cannot trust truthers. They made the Kate Perry video very popular, where you see the rocket go up and then there's a dummy in the capsule. Somebody manufactured that and then presented it as evidence of fakery. And then later they say, oh, this is from a 2017 launch. So then my question is, well, who's behind it? And why are these big anonymous engagement farmer channels all concerted in spreading bad information, knowing that most of it won't get fact checked? I don't trust anonymous sources as it is. I find it especially dubious when they have a big kind of like, they have like a big channel, big following, big responses, and they don't fix it. So if I had 1 million followers and I spread a easily debunkable bit of fake news, like I would be obliged to correct it. Yeah, Roxy, a white Trayvon, the kid that stabbed him is black. And so even though the stabbing is being framed as a self-defense, the story is he was in the wrong tent and these twins walk up to him and attempt to intimidate him into leaving. So the white getting stabbed by the black kid is not a racial thing, but it was some type of altercation. But it's been put into this racial context by right-wing agitators, specifically Jake Lang, who's a January 6th participant. So you got an actor, a psyop actor, a provocateur involved in this. And everywhere I go throughout social media, anybody who's talking about this is framing this thing in this way where, why isn't the father allowing us to use his son as a evidence of violence against whites? So they're trying to say there's some kind of systemic violence against whites now. It's like I said, it's like an inverted version of BLM. Oh, here's a bit of a receipt here. This is from Cinco Morpheus. This is back to my conversation about Fallout. Throughout the series, the production designers cleverly hid Vault Boy bobbleheads, a keen reference to the game's collectibles. Vault 33 even boasts a foosball table with Vault Boy figurines. So there's that. Yeah, the story is Anthony's accused of murdering Austin Metcalf by stabbing him in the heart. We don't have pictures. Okay, here's another thing. Jack Posobiec and others. So Jack Posobiec started Pizzagate, Major League PSYOP operative, close to Trump. Again, total world stage actor. But he is being threatened with lawsuits because he's trying to get a Freedom of Information Act or a FOIA release of the footage. So right-wingers trying to turn this into a race war narrative are trying to get footage of the stabbing. But all the phones were confiscated. We're being told that the phones of all the students who saw it were confiscated. So the footage isn't being revealed. So now you have, again, the father is on the side of trying to reconcile with the killer. Meanwhile, making a ton of money with his GoFundMe, and he's not allowing his kid to be turned into a martyr. So that's kind of the story with that. It's still evolving, but knowing it's such a big story and observing how much it's being hyped up, I presumed that sinners would play into it. And I would say I was vindicated. So again, this is Jake Lang, just for full context. This is the individual trying to, and this is on camera, trying to recruit the father into it.
And soul that would have been one of our strongest voices if he was still alive today.
So he's asking the father, can we have your son? If he was alive, he'd be one of our strong voices. Right. He'd be an America First, Nick Fuentes follower. But the father says, no, you have no right to do so. And ever since, Jake Lang has been retaliating by calling the father a coward, a grifter, weak, among other things. And they also seem to be mad, and he's made remarks about this, that the father has a handler who's black, this man with the cowboy hat. And so this Jake Lang has been publicly disparaging these people and the family and the father because of this. So again, I thought this was fishy at first, but now that I know this guy was a January 6th prisoner political prisoner who was just released by Trump a few months ago, there's no way this is anything other than a psyop, and probably a big one. This has got to be leading somewhere. And the fact that it has an entertainment counterpart concurrently is another reason why I'm suggesting that, yeah, there's certainly more to the story that's unfolding. And then again, a quick reminder on top of it, Tucker Carlson and Alex Jones just said that there's going to be a false flag disguised as a fight against racism. And he suggested that the Patriot Front might get shot up, obviously by BLM or maybe an Antifa. So again, fighting racism, killing a bunch of racists in their masks. Well, what happened at the end of Sinners? The protagonist mows down a bunch of Klansmen. So Tucker Carlson, Alex Jones, knowing who they are, you can consider this conversation that they had to be predictive programming. So predictive programming is not just in movies. It comes from every single propaganda vector out there. All right, this is also something might be relevant. There's a pastor, Jamal Bryant, who refers to Musk and Trump and Republicans as cockroaches, and he describes how cockroaches can only get away with it when they're in the dark, but when you turn the lights on, they reveal themselves. And here he says something about Musk and Trump being cockroaches.
It's getting ready to come on. JD fans, the light is getting ready to come on. MAGA, the light is getting ready to come on. Welcome, because the roaches will check in, but they won't check out.
The roaches will check in, but they won't check out.
Nothing climbing in your cupboard, but when you turn the light on, all of the roaches gotta start moving. I came to give a warning. Elon Musk, the light is getting ready to come on. Donald Trump, the light is getting ready to come on.
All right, so Musk, Trump, roaches won't check out, lights coming on. Yeah, it's a little inflammatory, but it's consistent with the madness, which again foreshadowed all this resentment against these rich politicians and the CEOs. And there you go. Now, on a lighter note, the third most viewed video on YouTube this week has a lot of people mad because it's got billions of views, but I think it's genius. But this is intriguing to think about. 10 years ago, if you wanted to produce a video like the one I'm showing on the screen, which it's a animation of a pug in a plane crash. So in this plane crash, and it's ludicrous, but it's funny in the sense that 10 years ago, this would have taken months to have created. It would have taken millions of dollars and experts with equipment and training. But this was prompted into existence by somebody with none of these skills, none of those resources. Just make me a video about a pug that jumps out of an exploding plane along with a baby tossed out the window and saves the baby from the plane crash, survives on an island with it. It's this video. It's now let me turn the sound off on it. So the story is basically the plane's going to explode. So the mother throws the baby out with a sheet as a parachute. And then this puppy also survives. And the pug saves the baby, grabs a suitcase to float on, and it remembers itself being thrown out the window by its owner, and it cries. So this video goes on for a couple minutes where it's emptying coconuts to fill the baby bottle, and it saves the baby. And eventually the Marines come in and save them. So again, it's ridiculous, but 5-10 years ago, you could not have justified the resources, the time, the energy to produce something so ludicrous. But now that everybody can do it, anything can be made. And it's just kind of interesting to see what's coming out of it, where people who don't have these skill sets, who would never have arrived at this, are suddenly capable. It'd be like just grabbing some random stranger, some random person on the street and saying, hey, we're going to put you in the seat of a Hollywood director. Make whatever movie you want. Like, you would never entrust somebody with all of that because it'd be a tremendous waste. But things have changed so much to where something like this is even possible. So somebody wrote this prompt, made this silly little movie, and it's been viewed billions of times. So that's just kind of random, but a lot of people are mad about it. They're mad about it. I've seen people mad because they've had aspirations of working in Hollywood. They have these dreams of achieving things in this old way, and now suddenly they've been rug pulled majorly. And they're a bit resentful, but you can't turn it back. By the way, here's the replacement for the WEF villain. We're going from eat the bugs to water is a privilege. I don't have his name off the top of my head. It's a hideous mask. In this picture, it looks like. But yes, water is a privilege. That's who's taking over for the World Economic Forum. I don't know who's taking over for the Pope. I would vote for Elon Musk. Some say there won't be one, that it's the last Pope. So for context, I'm going to play this clip so we can hear the prophecy of Tucker Carlson describing how there's going to be a false flag fighting racism and that this will be used to shut down the internet.
I want to make a prediction because I just want to be on tape saying this. I'm going to say it again even more clearly this time. And of course, I hope I'm wrong. I pray I'm wrong. But I do think a lot of the really crazy, bitter, ethnic hate that you see on social media is fake. It's people are saying it, don't mean it. I think it's like, the Klansmen you'd see marching and you're like, there are no Klansmen. And you're like, what? And of course you find out that it's fake. And it's designed to convince people that there's like a lot of roiling ethnic hatred that doesn't really exist. And that's a predicate.
Yeah, Patriot Front.
Exactly. It's Charlottesville. But that's happening online right now. And I know that it is.
So he invokes Charlottesville. Charlottesville, very significant. Michael Brown, hands up, don't shoot. Charlottesville, Nick Fuentes, America First. They will not replace us. Jews will not replace us. A lot of the newer far right white nationalism, Patriot Front, it all has its origin there at Charlottesville, which is something of a response to the BLM. So what he's bringing up here, in my opinion, this isn't him just making a random guess, but I think he's informed. And note that they're calling it a false flag in advance. And the last conversation, the last one was about the false flag prediction for 9/11. Now, false flags never happen. There's never been a false flag. It's a fallacy. False flag presumes the events are real. It's a built-in assumption. So what I'm saying here is that my take on the big picture based on the psyops in play and the movie environment and the political agitation is that there's going to be a fake event, not a false flag. And it might be the equivalent of a bunch of Klansmen getting mowed down or Patriot Front or the equivalent. And that's exactly what they're predicting.
And I think that at some point, I pray I'm wrong, but there's going to be an act of violence, ethnic inspired violence, of hate inspired violence, actual hate, like killing people. And I really hope I'm wrong, but I feel like this is real. And that event will be used to shut down free speech.
Now, of course, we can trust him and his feelings. This was a guy who survived an attack by an alien, and he has scars to prove it, but he won't show us the scars. But what makes him say such a thing with such specificity and confidence? I'm suggesting that he wants to be recognized as prescient, like Alex Jones. So he's got Alex Jones here, and he's making a prediction publicly that there's going to be an attack against white supremacists very soon, and it's going to be used to shut down free speech. Well, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's the whole idea behind Disease X and the madness, that free speech is the cause of all of this.
On social media. Because that is the threat. And you saw it with TikTok, like, oh, we need to ban TikTok because China owns it. No, nothing to do with China. It had everything to do with opinions that the people in charge didn't like being expressed there. And it's like, we're just going to, and the Congress went along with it. But if there's an act of violence and innocents are murdered, and I pray that doesn't happen because I hate that above all, but it has happened and I feel like it could happen again. And people say, and a lot of good people will go along with it, just like they went along with the censorship of you and the destruction of your life because they were told like he's bad. He had something to do with murdering children. And then people just shut down. They're like,
yeah, he's right about this. And I think this is the whole point. I think the real purpose of Musk purchasing X or Twitter, turning it to X, is to set the stage for disease X, to set the stage for the pretext, the justification for censorship that everyone is going to go along with. Anyway, thanks for hanging out tonight. I apologize for the audio issues we had. I will probably cut those out. I will do my best. But in the meantime, I'll be in the Discord server working on it so we can get active again there. And we're very active in Gilded. And if you don't go to Gilded or you don't have time, because I realize a lot of people don't, I started this new thing, which you'll get in the newsletter, where I use a bot to scrape all the comments, and it gives us a summary, a breakdown with quotes of the various things that we're talking about. And I like the format that it gives me, and it allows me to take 12 hours of content and distill it into a single page. So anybody who sees that might say, well, I want to participate in this particular thread or this conversation or line of inquiry. So there's that to look forward to. Anyway, thanks for joining. This is the coloring book. I put a link below for Auto Hoax It, Meditations on Media Fakery. And this is Full Red Pill by Shill Scanner. Have a great evening.
These deceptive theories exploiting the innocent youth. Why do we believe these lies that are presented to us as truth? Pseudoscientific nonsense and endless universe of expanding bullshit. Other worlds don't exist. We are trapped on this plane of existence. Let this game of risk checkerboard conductive sectors. 33 slices of the bite within the vectors. Beehive colony, you collect the nectar. Earth's broke down men, someone call the record. What? I can tell you about some things that gonna blow your mind. Everything that you've been taught throughout your life's a lie. Indoctrinated to regret your perception just to believe a school lesson so you can pass to the next one. Brainwash so you trust the authority. They want you to think you're the minority.